The family moved quietly through the forest, their goods tied to the backs of elephants. It was a large shipment, but it was also a trap. As they traveled through the dark night, they saw shadows flickering among the trees and knew what was happening. A band of mercenaries had been robbing merchants for months, turning every journey into a dangerous gamble. The family exchanged worried glances, aware they were under siege. The mercenaries were close, creeping through the jungle, ready to strike. The leader of the group raised his voice. "We are just a family of traders. Please do not harm us," he called out. But there was a sly smile on his face, hidden by the darkness. No one could see his smile, and tonight was going to be different. The thieves had chosen the wrong group to ambush. They had chosen to attack gods among men. Unbeknownst to the mercenaries, this was Mambo and his family, and things were about to change forever. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. The leader of the mercenaries stepped out from the shadows, his boots crunching softly on the leaves beneath him. He was a tall man with a broad chest, his face half hidden under a scruffy beard. His eyes gleamed with arrogance as he sized up the family standing before him. This was almost too easy. He let out a low chuckle. "What luck," he said, his voice filled with mockery. "A shipment this big, and left so poorly guarded. The gods are smiling on us tonight." He moved closer, and in the dim moonlight, he saw the women among the group. His grin widened. "And look, they have blessed us even more. My men have not felt a soft body in ages. Perhaps tonight our fortunes have truly turned." Maria, Mambo's wife, let out a faint hiss, her eyes narrowing into slits. The leader paused at the strange sound, but quickly dismissed it, accustomed to people trembling before him. He leaned in, his voice mocking. "I know you're just traders with families, but we're men with needs, and tonight we'll take whatever we please." Mambo remained calm, his voice steady. "Take what you want, but don't touch my family." The leader's grin widened. "I want more than goods, I want fear, I want to hear you beg." Maria's hiss grew louder, but Mambo whispered, "Not yet." The leader sneered, "Trying to scare me with a hiss? I've heard worse from the wind." He stepped closer, raising a hand toward Maria. Mambo warned softly, "Be careful. Some things bite back." The leader hesitated, then chuckled. "Oh, I do hope they bite. I like a little fight." But he had no idea that beneath those calm faces lay a force far from ordinary. Tonight he would learn the true meaning of fear. The mercenary leader's grin stretched wide as Maria spoke, her voice unexpectedly deep and sultry. "Why don't we go into the bushes?" she suggested, with a strange smile. "That's my girl," he replied, eyes gleaming with lust and triumph. "I knew you'd come around." He turned to his men with a smirk. "You boys can have your turn after I've had my fill." He grabbed her arm and led her into the thick undergrowth. The forest held its breath, and then suddenly a scream pierced the night. A sharp, primal sound that sent chills through the mercenaries. The leader's voice turned to frantic cries of agony, mixed with strange, unearthly hisses. His men froze, their laughter dying in their throats, fear flickering in their eyes as they glanced at Mambo and Kato, who stood calmly smoking their pipes, as if nothing unusual was happening. What's happening?" one of the mercenaries whispered, his face pale in the moonlight. The scream stopped and a heavy silence fell. Then from the bushes, a massive snake burst forth, its scales glinting like armor, its eyes blazing with rage. Panic swept through the mercenaries as Mambo and Kato transformed into enormous serpents, their eyes locked onto their terrified prey. The forest erupted with desperate screams and cries for mercy, but there was no escape. One by one, the mercenaries fell silent, leaving the forest drenched in the scent of blood and fear. As Mambo and Kato returned to their human forms, they exchanged a glance, feeling a new dark hunger that could not be undone. They had tasted blood, and now something within them had changed, something that made them feel more alive than ever before. Izoro, Sia, and Tendai sat in silence, the thick scent of herbs filling the air, as the old woman Mami Abeni hummed her haunting melody. Her name was whispered with reverence in villages far and wide. She was known for her powers, rumored to have been taught by a mermaid when she was just a child. People said that the ocean had gifted her with secrets unknown to mortal men, and those who sought her counsel were wise to listen carefully. Her eyes remained fixed on Tendai, as if piercing through to the deepest secrets of his soul. Tendai shifted uncomfortably, feeling his heartbeat quicken, but he dared not speak. Zoro finally broke the silence with a plea. "Mami Abeni, we seek your guidance. The boy carries both our blood and the snake's. We need him protected. We are taking him to a place where his scent will get him killed on sight. Help us, O Great One." Mami Abeni continued her song as if she hadn't heard him. The tension grew, but after a long moment she stopped and spoke, her voice raspy yet firm. "I will help you, but this will come at a great sacrifice. The hunters, gods in their own right, cannot be deceived by mere charms. The snake within the boy's blood must be transferred." Zoro, confused, asked her to explain. She responded with a faint smile, her eyes twinkling. "The boy carries the blood of two worlds, the hunter and the serpent. To protect him, we must remove the serpent and place it into another vessel, a soul strong enough to bear the curse and keep it contained. This vessel will be hunted by both worlds and accepted by neither, and once done, the transfer cannot be undone." A cold fear gripped Tendai as he realized the gravity of the situation. Zoro and Sia exchanged tense glances, understanding the cost. Zoro's voice wavered as he spoke. "There must be another way. We cannot bring an innocent into this." Mami Abeni's face grew serious. "There is no other way. The gods demand a life for a life," she replied. Silence filled the room as the weight of the decision settled over them. Finally, Zoro spoke. "We have heard you, Mami Abeni. Allow us to ponder on it. We shall return. If we do not, we will have decided against it," he said quietly. Mami Abeni nodded, and as they departed, her ancient song resumed, echoing softly through the night. The hunter goddess and the snake goddess knelt before God in his throne room, bolts of lightning crackling around him. He was furious.
"Hunter goddess, you meddled in the affairs of humans. You know the rules. You must never interfere in the lives of the earthlings without seeking approval. What was your reason?"
The hunter goddess had never been summoned before God in this manner. She trembled, struggling to find her words. "It was a moment of weakness, my lord. I humbly ask for forgiveness," she said, bowing deeply. The snake goddess stifled a laugh, uncertain why she had been summoned. God's gaze shifted toward her.
"I expect such reckless behavior from the snake goddess, not you."
The snake goddess fixed her eyes on the floor, not daring to make a sound. It had all started when the tunnels began to flood. The hunter goddess had known that Jeno wouldn't survive. She had paced around her chamber, torn over what to do. Jeno was a great leader. He reminded her so much of Kabo. "Not yet," she whispered to herself, before leaping into a vortex and shielding Jeno from the rushing waters. Jeno watched in disbelief as the water flowed violently around him, a true miracle indeed.
"Hunter goddess, you have prevented a soul from meeting its maker. Now you must choose, for it is written, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and a soul for a soul. Who will you choose, hunter goddess?"
The goddess trembled, tears streaming down her face. The snake goddess looked over and understood her pain. She remembered a time when she had no followers, when all she had desired was to be a revered goddess. Now that she realized it was much more than receiving prayers and praise. These people had become her children. She celebrated their births, and a part of her died with them.
"Choose, or a choice will be made for you."
"Kabo," she whispered softly.
"Then it shall be so. You may go."
He paused, then commanded,
"Snake goddess, you stay."
The snake goddess's heart pounded in her chest. God continued,
"You asked for your leader, Asa, to travel through centuries and inhabit an earthling. 7 days you were given, and those days are up."
The snake goddess understood. This had been a great favor, for without Asa and her connection to the merfolk, her people would have suffered greatly. She bowed deeply and left. Back on Earth, Kabo screamed loudly. clutching his heart as he fell to the ground. Nandi rushed to him. "This can't be happening," she screamed, as Kabo, who had been fine just moments before, organizing the hunters to retrieve their fallen brothers, now lay lifeless. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw Jeno emerging from the tunnels. Her happiness mixed with sorrow as they embraced. "Father, Father, where is Kwame?" Nala asked frantically, her voice filled with desperation. She scanned the area, her eyes wide and searching, but there was no sign of him. Jeno remained silent, his face pale and his eyes distant, still trying to comprehend what he had seen in the tunnels. Much had happened down there, things he couldn't explain, things he didn't understand. "He is gone, Nala," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "No, no, he can't be gone," she cried, her voice breaking with each word. He promised he would come back." Jeno closed his eyes, unable to bear the weight of her grief. He reached out and pulled her close, holding her tightly as her tears soaked his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Nala," he whispered, his own heart heavy with sorrow. "I'm so sorry." Meanwhile, as Asa looked at her people, their faces filled with joy at their victory, she felt a deep sadness. "My people," she began, "I came here by leaping through many centuries and timelines to fight alongside you, and I am proud that we were victorious. But now I must go, for the goddess demands it. Meeting you all was a gift, and I truly cherish every moment we spent together." Amina was stunned to silence. She had no idea this would happen. "I do not leave you without a leader," Asa continued. "You have my descendant, Amina, a wise and capable leader. She will guide you to a safe place that has been graciously provided for us by Black Rose. Remember this victory and how our allies helped us win. Keep those friendships and always remember who you are." Amina sobbed at this revelation. "Why didn't you tell me?" Amina's voice trembled, her eyes wide with shock and betrayal. Asa looked at her, a tender smile touching her lips. "What good would it have done?" she whispered gently. "We are all but vessels passing through time and space. I lived a long life in my time, and this second chance, and it was a gift beyond measure. Every moment, every breath I took with you, my blood, was more precious than I could have ever imagined. Knowing my people have survived, endured through all these ages, it's a blessing I never thought I'd receive." Her voice wavered as she glanced at Kwame, then back to Amina. "You have many challenges ahead," she continued softly. "But I know you will be a greater leader than any who came before you." "No, no, please, Asa." Amina's voice broke, desperation spilling out. "I'm not ready. Just one more day, please." A deep sorrow filled Asa's eyes as she shook her head slowly. "It is not up to me, Amina," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of inevitability. She reached out, her fingers brushing Amina's cheek, a final gesture of love and farewell. "These people are yours now. Lead them well, my dear. May the goddess be with you always." With those final words, they both fell to the ground, and then there was darkness. Before we dive into episode 2, I need to pause for a moment because I've discovered something important. It seems that some of you haven't watched the second battle between the hunters and the snake people yet. Trust me, this is an episode you do not want to miss. It's a pivotal moment in our story. So, if you haven't seen it, I've added the link to the last episode of Season 2 in the description below. Go back and watch it now before continuing on this journey. For those of you who are all caught up, let's get back to it. Next up, Episode 2, Animalistic Hunger. Let's sink our teeth into this one. It had been a week since the attack on the mercenaries by Mambo and his family, but the memories of that night still lingered like a fresh wound. Mambo felt his stomach growling, but it wasn't food that he craved. This hunger was deeper, primal, something dark that had been awakened during the hunt. The family exchanged silent glances. They all knew they needed another hunt to quench the fire inside. But they weren't just killers, they told themselves. They were protecting their people, making the roads safe again. A noble cause, or so they believed. Driven by this need, they took to the roads once more, their thirst for the hunt becoming insatiable. At first, the villagers whispered in awe. There were rumors of gods in the forest, protecting traders and travelers. People said they had been saved, that the dangers lurking in the woods were finally gone. Mambo and his family were seen as heroes, guardians of the land, but as the days turned into weeks and the hunts grew more frequent, things began to change. Soon Mambo and his family weren't just targeting the criminals or the mercenaries, they were attacking the very travelers and traders they had sworn to protect. The line between justice and greed blurred. They enriched themselves with the spoils, the golden goods left behind by their victims. The villagers grew uneasy, but fear kept them silent. At first, Mambo and his family hid their true nature, transforming into snakes deep within the forest, far from the eyes of the villagers. But soon, the need for secrecy faded, replaced by a hunger too strong to control. They began to shift in front of everyone, right before the horrified eyes of traders, villagers, and travelers alike. Some fled in terror, disappearing into the woods to escape the horror of what they had seen. Others, overcome with fear, fell to their knees, offering prayers to the gods they believed Mambo and his family to be. Gods among men. But deep down, Mambo knew that this was only the beginning. The hunger would never stop. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. High above, the snake goddess watched them with pride. Their offerings were pleasing to her, the screams of their victims like a drug in her veins. Sacrifices made in her name, whether willing or unwilling, were all the same to the gods. Each death filled her coffers with golden coins. The sound of them piling up was music to her ears. She smiled, knowing she was getting closer to the coveted second tier of the gods, a dream she had never thought possible for someone like her. As she danced in her chambers, drunk on power, the sound of victory echoed around her. But far above, God looked down. His eyes narrowed as he watched the savage nature of the snake people unfold. Free will required that the people cry out for help before any intervention could take place. For now they remained silent, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the danger, and so the heavens watched, waiting with bated breath. Tendai lay still, pretending to be asleep, as he listened to the whispers of his father, Sia, and his grandfather, Zoro. The tone of their voices was serious, almost chilling in the quiet of the night. "It's the only way," Zoro whispered. There was a pause before Sia replied. "But father, we swore an oath to protect the humans. If we do this, we'll be breaking that oath." Sia's words were true, but losing Tendai was not an option either of them wanted to face. There were only 4 days left before the 7-day deadline to Cabo. Time was slipping away. They whispered back and forth, their words becoming more hushed, but Tendai could still sense the tension between them. Finally, both men stood, their decision made. Tendai's heart pounded as he watched them leave the room, slipping into the shadows. He quietly followed, keeping his distance, his body tense with fear and curiosity. The moonlight barely illuminated the path as they walked toward a distant homestead. There, a boy of about 15 lay sleeping in one of the huts. Zoro and Saya had chosen him. They believed he would be a strong vessel, able to carry the curse that threatened Tendai's life. Moving like shadows, the two men circled the homestead, pinpointing the hut where the boy slept. Not a sound disturbed the night. No dogs barked, no leaves rustled. Tendai watched in horror as they silently entered the hut and carried the boy out. The boy didn't struggle, as though in a trance, his body limp and compliant. Tendai's heart raced. He wanted to stop them, to scream, but he couldn't move. All he could do was run back home, terrified. When he reached home, Tendai quickly slipped back into his bed, pretending once again to be asleep. Moments later, he heard the door of his grandmother's hut open and then close softly. Zoro and Sia re-entered the house, silent as ghosts, and lay down beside him as if nothing had happened. They had done the unthinkable, but the gods demanded a life for a life, and they would make sure that life was not Tendai's. Amina awoke to the sensation of swift movement. Her body was tied securely to the back of one of the snake people, their long, scaled bodies gliding effortlessly through the dense forest. Trees blurred past them as they moved with a speed that made Amina's head spin. She wondered how long they had been traveling. Time had become a blur as she drifted in and out of consciousness. A tear slipped down her face as thoughts of Asa filled her mind. She could feel it, the loss. Asa's energy was gone, snuffed out, like a light that had once warmed her soul. She wasn't here anymore. Amina's heart ached, and her body felt drained as though the very essence of life had been siphoned from her. She was weak, her limbs heavy, every breath a struggle. The sun was beginning to set, and Amina hoped they would arrive soon. There was only one place they could be headed, a sanctuary her mother, Black Rose, had made for them. A place where they could rest, regroup, and maybe find some sense of safety. But would they ever be safe again? Her eyelids grew heavy. She tried to stay awake, to hold on, but the exhaustion was too much. Her body gave in, and slowly she drifted back into the darkness, unsure of what awaited her when she awoke. Meanwhile, the hunters had returned to their headquarters. A deep sense of mourning hung in the air, thick as fog, as their fallen comrades were carried one by one to the healers. Among them was Kabo. The pain of loss was heavy, almost unbearable. Jeno stood silent, trying to make sense of what had happened in those dark tunnels, but no explanation came to him. He replayed the events over and over in his mind, but each time the answers slipped further away. He looked at the faces of the remaining hunters, their eyes filled with sorrow, and a wave of guilt washed over him. As their leader, he felt he had failed them. He hadn't considered all the angles, hadn't made provisions for the merfolk. His decisions had led them straight into a massacre. The weight of his failure crushed him, and he knew he would never forgive himself. "Father, Father," a voice broke through Jeno's thoughts. It was Nala, her voice trembling with anger and grief. "I just spoke to the healers. They said Kwame was not among the dead." "What happened to Kwame? Why did you want him to go with you? Answer me," she shouted, her eyes burning with pain and anger. Jeno turned to her, the sorrow in his face shifting to cold resolve. "Nala," he said firmly, "I am not only your father, but your commander. You will not question my authority or my actions. Do you understand me?" Taken aback, Nala whispered, "Yes," her voice small, as if the fire in her had been extinguished. Jeno clenched his fists. That Kwame was a bad omen. He had let a snake into his house, and because of it, his people had been slaughtered. But there was no time for regret or mourning. The goddess had spared him for a reason, and he intended to fulfill his destiny. "Call the council elders," Jeno ordered Samuel, his voice steady and commanding. "We are hunters, and we must continue to hunt." Far above, the hunter goddess smiled. The price had been high, but she knew she had made the right choice. Tribe members, how's everyone holding up? Stories have a way of wrapping themselves around you, don't they? I hope you're enjoying them as much as I love sharing them. Now let's bow our heads and step into episode 3, the snake goddess worship. Ready, let's slither in. Mambo smiled as he stood before the towering structure, nearly complete. This was more than just a building. It was the crowning glory of his family, a temple dedicated to the snake goddess herself. The snake had become a symbol of power and wealth, drawing people from far and wide who wished to witness the deity that had blessed Mambo's family with such an extraordinary gift. Visitors arrived with riches in hand, hoping for the goddess to bestow the same blessing upon them. For some, Mambo attempted to summon the goddess, but she never appeared. It was as if the gods themselves had closed the vortex, preventing her from coming forth. Over time, however, women in Mambo's bloodline began to give birth to children with the gift naturally passed on through their veins. It was then that they realized the gift could be transferred through blood. With this revelation, the snake people began to forge powerful alliances, sealed through marriage. Their influence spread across the world, and the gift of snake blood became a prized possession, available only to the wealthy. However, for the common people, the gift became a curse. No longer free, they were forced to serve the snake people, building monuments and enriching their masters beyond measure. Those who dared resist were sacrificed to the goddess, while the lucky ones fled to hide in caves. Mambo, standing on the temple steps, watched the workers below with fear in their eyes. The goddess demanded obedience, and he was there to deliver it. Yet deep within, something unsettled Mambo. The air felt heavy with tension, and the shadows seemed to creep closer, as if something unseen was waiting. Unbeknownst to him, God was watching intently. Mambo turned away, trying to shake the unease, focusing on the near-completed temple and the summoning of the goddess it promised. But the days of the snake people's glory were numbered, and soon they would face a natural exterminator. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. The snake goddess rushed through her grand mansion, her movements quick and purposeful, as she barked orders at the servants, pointing at decorations and giving precise instructions on where everything should go. Tonight, she was hosting the most prestigious party of the year, a gathering for the upper echelons of the gods. Everything had to be perfect. "Morning Star," she shouted. "I've been looking for you. Where have you been?" Morning Star appeared from the shadows, a playful smirk on his face. "I've been going to and fro on the earth, seeking whom I may devour," he said, quoting an ancient scripture with a teasing tone. The snake goddess rolled her eyes but smiled. "Have you heard? They're building a temple for me. What an honor." "Yes, indeed," Morning Star replied, grinning. "Congratulations. It seems you've come a long way since your days in the garden," he added, with mock admiration. "You've got a lot of jokes today," she said, raising an eyebrow. "But seriously, I owe it all to you, my friend. I wanted to formally invite you to the best party of the year. All the first-tier gods and goddesses will be there. Can you believe the god of water is going to be in my mansion? I still can't believe I even have a mansion." Morning Star's smile faded slightly. Though he loved seeing her excitement, there was a shadow behind his eyes, a weight on his shoulders. "Goddess," he began, his tone suddenly serious, "you might want to sit down for this." The sudden shift in his voice made her heart skip a beat. She hurried to sit, her hands trembling slightly. "What is it? You're scaring me." Morning Star stepped closer, his face grave. "A reliable source has informed me that the people have cried out to God. You will be summoned today, and your people's fate will be decided. You are to discover who will become your people's natural exterminator." The snake goddess froze, her eyes wide with shock. "What? So soon?" she whispered, barely able to find her voice. Morning Star's expression was grim. "There's no way of knowing who it will be. It could be the lion god, the god of war, anyone. The people must choose, but in the end only God knows for now." The weight of his words hit her like a punch to the gut. The carefree joy of party planning vanished in an instant. She had never expected this day to come, not like this, and not now. Morning Star stepped back, and before she could ask any more questions, he vanished without a word, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The room felt colder. The walls seemed to close in as the enormity of the situation settled in. Suddenly, a bright light filled the room. A messenger angel appeared, his face stern and unreadable. "Snake Goddess," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "You have been summoned to appear before God and your peers." He handed her a scroll with the royal decree. "The fate of your people will be decided today." Gripping the scroll tightly, her heart pounded. The grand party was now the furthest thing from her mind. Everything was about to change, and there was no telling how it would end. Zoro woke with a sudden jolt, a sinking feeling in his chest. Something was wrong. He could hear hurried footsteps echoing outside the hut. Glancing quickly over to Tendai's bed, he saw it was empty. Panic gripped him as he slipped out quietly, not wanting to wake Saya. His heart pounded as he tiptoed outside to see what was happening. The door to grandmother's hut was wide open, and dread washed over him. As he moved closer, Tendai appeared in the doorway. "What have you done, Tendai?" Zoro demanded, his voice low but filled with despair. Tendai glared at him, unblinking. "I know what you did last night with father. I couldn't let you finish it." Zoro's blood boiled. "Are you out of your mind, Tendai? Do you want to end your life?" he growled, clenching his fists. "We're trying to save you." Tendai's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a sneer. "Save me? You call this saving me?" he hissed in defiance. Zoro stepped forward, fury burning in his chest. "How could you let the boy go?" he shouted. Tendai hissed in response, his skin rippling as the faint outline of scales appeared. "So, you want to bite me now?" Zoro asked, his voice low and dangerous, his eyes locked on Tendai. The tension grew as Tendai's transformation began. His skin shimmered, turning snake-like, his body shifting as if preparing to strike. Zoro felt his own ancestral blood surge within him, the hunter's spirit awakening. Tendai, defiant, circled Zoro, trying to summon the power of the colossal snake within, but something was off. He couldn't reach the beast inside. Suddenly, Sia appeared from the house, alarmed. "What in the goddess's name is going on?" he shouted. Seeing Tendai mid-transformation ignited Sia's hunter spirit. "Tendai, change back," he warned. Zoro's eyes glowed, his veins bulging. "I should have ended your life when I found out what you were," he snarled. Tendai hissed, "Then why didn't you?" Just as Zoro prepared to strike, frantic footsteps approached. "Stop!" a voice called. "Grandmother says not to harm the boy. There's another way." Mami Abeni's grandson appeared, breathless. At the boy's plea, Tendai reverted to human form, and Zoro released the hunter spirit, calming himself. They turned toward Mami Abeni's homestead, knowing that whatever alternative she offered would come at a steep price. The goddess appeared to Amina in her dream, her voice soft yet commanding. "You must wake up, Amina, it is time." Amina stirred, her heart racing. "But I'm not ready," she whispered, fear gripping her. "Your people are looking to you to save them," the goddess gently whispered into her ear. "They need you." The words jolted Amina awake, her breath sharp as she sat up in the dimly lit room. She could still feel the presence of the goddess lingering around her. "She was here," Amina whispered to herself, trying to steady her racing heart. "Calm down, Amina," came a soothing voice from the doorway, a voice she knew all too well. "Mother," Amina breathed, relief washing over her as she saw the familiar face of Mama Amina, the woman who had raised her. "Black Rose told us that you would come, and here you are," Mama Amina said with a warm smile. "Welcome home, my child." Amina embraced her mother, the woman who had cared for her since she was a little girl. But now Amina knew the truth. Mama Amina held her close for a moment, then whispered to a nearby woman, "Let them know she is awake." Amina took a deep breath and prepared herself for what was to come. She stepped outside, her heart pounding as she faced her people. They had gathered, waiting in silence, their eyes filled with hope and uncertainty. This would be her first time addressing them without Asa. She felt the goddess's presence again, her voice a gentle echo in her ear. "They need you," the goddess whispered once more. Standing tall, Amina's gaze swept across the crowd. "My people," she began, her voice steady yet firm, "I know these times have been difficult, but today marks a new beginning, a chance for us to rebuild and make this place our home." Her people stood at attention, their faces full of hope and trust. Though the future was uncertain, they were ready to follow her wherever she would lead them, confident that Amina would rise to meet whatever challenges lay ahead. This was only the beginning. Wow, that was something, wasn't it? Stories have a way of pulling you into a world so vivid, you almost forget it's fiction. But tell me, who's your favorite character so far? Let me know in the comments below. Coming up, Episode 4, Summoning a God. Let's call upon the divine and uncover the secrets within. Kabo and his family huddled together, whispering in hushed tones. Several other families were present, all gathered in the dark safety of the cave. They had been on the run for months, moving from one hideout to the next, always evading the snake people who hunted them relentlessly. Fear gripped their hearts, but tonight something was different. There was hope. The families had been searching for someone, a medium who could communicate directly with the gods. Now, finally, in their midst stood a seer, a figure cloaked in mystery. His voice was raspy, like wind passing through dry leaves.
"The gods will answer your prayers,"
the seer said,
"but you must choose the god or goddess who will bring about the end of the snake people. Choose wisely."
The group exchanged anxious glances. One man spoke up. "We should summon the god of water or fire. They will destroy these creatures once and for all." A murmur of disappointment swept through the crowd. Water and fire were powerful, yes, but their wrath was indiscriminate. Innocent lives would be lost too. "What about the lion god?" another voice suggested. "He is fierce and powerful." Kabo, who had been silent until now, felt a stirring in his chest. He cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "We have seen what the snake blood has done to those snake people," he said. "It has distorted their humanity, turning them into monsters driven by an endless hunger for human blood. If we summon the lion god or any animal god, we risk becoming no better than them." The group shifted uncomfortably. "I propose we summon a goddess. She will allow us to keep our humanity." "A goddess?" one man asked, sounding unimpressed. "Yes," Cabo replied firmly. "A goddess whose senses are sharper than the finest blade, whose strength rivals that of a dozen men. Her steps are silent as the wind, and her skill with weapons is unmatched. She is fierce, a protector of the very forests that shelter us now." The group leaned in, their interest piqued. The fire crackled in the silence, and all eyes were on Cabo. "Who is this goddess?" someone whispered from the back. Cabo lifted his voice, his heart pounding with the weight of his decision. "I propose we summon the goddess of the—" The people edged closer, holding their breath, eager to hear the name that could change everything. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. Meanwhile in the heavens, the gods and goddesses sat in tense silence, each one waiting, each one hoping. They had all been summoned to witness the unveiling, the moment when the people would choose the god or goddess to defend them. For those who embodied strength and power, it was a moment of anticipation. To be chosen would be a great honor. The snake goddess knelt before the great god, her heart pounding in her throat. This position, one of humility and submission, was all too familiar to her now. She had created the snake people, these demigods, and now she feared the consequences of that choice.
"Gods and goddesses,"
the great god began, his voice rumbling through the heavens.
"I have summoned you because my people have cried out. The veil has been opened."
With a wave of his hand, an image appeared, a vision of Cabo and his group, desperate and weary, crying out to the heavens. The seer stood among them, holding a blade above a trembling goat, ready to make the sacrifice.
"Snake goddess, this day should not come as a surprise to you. It was foretold when you created the demigods, these creatures of darkness."
The snake goddess's mind raced. Who will they choose? She thought. Suddenly her thoughts were interrupted by the seer's blade slicing through flesh, followed by the soft sound of blood hitting the ground. The gods and goddesses watched in silence, holding their breath, waiting for the seer to speak.
"We call upon the hunter goddess."
The seer cried out, his voice echoing through the heavens.
"Hunter goddess, protector of the forest and the wilderness, we ask you to be our defender."
Time seemed to freeze for the hunter goddess. The room of gods erupted in cheers. This was the greatest honor a god or goddess could receive. The people had chosen her.
"Hunter goddess, come forward. The people have spoken. They have chosen you as their defender. Serve them well. I have no doubt in your abilities."
The hunter goddess stepped forward, her voice steady. "It is a great honor, my lord. I will serve them with everything I have." A swirling vortex of light surrounded her, and in an instant she was gone, swept away to answer the people's call. The snake goddess felt a wave of defeat wash over her. This was worse than she had ever imagined. The hunter goddess was highly skilled, her precision unmatched. There would be no mercy. She collapsed to the floor, weak and trembling. This could very well be the end. Zoro, Sia, and Tendai stood silently before the river, their eyes scanning the still glassy surface. They had been told to meet Mami Abeni here, by the water. It was well known that Mami Abeni's healing powers came from the mermaids, but now, as they stared at the unmoving water, doubt crept in. Tendai broke the silence, his voice low and trembling. "Grandfather, I'm sorry for letting the boy go. I couldn't let him suffer for my sake." Zoro's eyes flashed with anger. "Not now, Tendai," he growled, just as the first ripple appeared in the river. "You went behind my back, and your father's. There will be consequences." Before more could be said, Mami Abeni appeared on the riverbank, her clothes dry as if she hadn't just emerged from the depths. Her presence silenced the argument, her aura commanding respect. "I have consulted powers greater than my own," Mami Abeni began, her voice smooth but heavy with authority. "They will help you. The snake within the boy will be restrained. held in the water for 7 generations. But on the 8th, the curse will resurface, only if the descendant of Tendai encounters a transformed snake person. If not, they will live a normal life until activated. The men stood frozen, the weight of her words settling in like stones. This was their relief, their salvation. Tendai's bloodline would be free, at least for a time. Zoro finally spoke, his voice steady, but filled with curiosity. What debt do we owe for this great favor? Mami Abeni smiled, a mysterious glint in her eyes. My friends, the mermaids, ask for a task to be completed in return, she said softly. Zoro and Sia exchanged uneasy glances. We are all ears, Mami Abeni, Sia said, his voice cautious. There is a powerful plant that grows high in the mountains, Mami Abeni explained. The merfolk need it for reasons I cannot share with you. Many have gone to retrieve it, lured by promises of riches, but none have returned. The merfolk offer you something far greater than riches. They offer life, 7 lifetimes over, she said, looking at Tendai. Her words hung in the air, but Zoro felt his chest tighten. He knew the dangers of the mountain. Mami Abeni, he began, we have heard of the shape-shifting witch who guards this plant. She doesn't let anyone come near it. Mami Abeni's smile widened as though their fear amused her. Good, she said. Then you are more prepared than most. She continued, her voice firm. The plant glows brightest and is most potent during the full moon. Go now. May your goddess guide you. Without warning, Mami Abeni stretched out her hand and took Tendai's. Together they disappeared into the water, the river swallowing them whole as if they were never there. Zoro felt a sharp sadness. Maybe he should have been kinder to Tendai. This could very well be the last time they ever saw each other. With heavy hearts, Zoro and Sia turned away from the river and set off toward the great mountain, knowing that their journey had only just begun. The hunters gathered in a quiet clearing, their faces shadowed by grief as they paid their final respects to their fallen brothers. Jeno stood at the front, his heart breaking as he said his last goodbye to his twin brother. They hadn't always agreed, but their bond had been unshakable, built on years of trust and love. Now that bond was shattered. He felt Nandi's hand on his shoulder, her presence a constant support. He was grateful for her, but his mind wandered. Where is Nala? He wondered. He hadn't seen her all day and it gnawed at him. He scanned the crowd, searching for his daughter, but she was nowhere to be found. Have you seen Nala? He asked Nandi, a hint of concern creeping into his voice. Nandi smiled, trying to reassure him. I'm sure she's here somewhere, she said softly, but her words didn't ease his worry. Something didn't feel right. Meanwhile, far from the gathering, Nala stood alone on the beach, the wind whipping through her hair. The air was filled with the scent of the snake people. Her father had lied to her. She could feel it in her bones. He had told her that Kwame's body couldn't be recovered, that it had been too dangerous. But Nala knew her father well, and he never left a brother behind. It was the creed of the brotherhood. Something was wrong, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her father was hiding the truth. Her eyes narrowed as she gazed at the horizon. Questions churned in her mind, and with each passing moment, her resolve grew. Kwame hadn't been killed. He had been taken, captured by the snake people. She was sure of it now. And if her father wouldn't act, she would. Determination surged through her veins as she made her decision. She would find Kwame. She would rescue him, no matter what dangers awaited. Without a second thought, Nala turned away from the beach, disappearing into the forest. The scent of the snake people was strong, and she followed it, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fierce resolve. The magic of storytelling. It has this incredible way of keeping you hooked, doesn't it? And the next tale, it's nothing short of legendary. Episode 5. The hunter goddess is ready to take her place as the chosen one, ordained by the god himself. The earth shook as the goddess slammed into the ground, her landing so powerful that cracks split through the soil, rippling outward. The goddess stood before Kabo and his group, towering over them like a mountain of muscle and strength. Her presence was terrifying, a force so raw and primal, it made the men feel small, insignificant. No one dared move. Their feet seemed nailed to the earth, their breaths shallow and shaky. I have heard your prayers, the goddess's voice boomed, like the deep growl of a distant storm. I come bearing a gift, a power beyond mortal limits. You will become gods among men, hunters, destroyers of the snake people. Your senses will sharpen beyond anything you've known. You will scent your prey from miles away, hear even the softest rustle of danger. Your bodies will transform, infused with my strength, my speed, my ferocity. You will be unstoppable. The group remained frozen, the weight of her words sinking in. But be warned, she continued, her voice dropping lower, more dangerous. This gift carries great responsibility. It will not only change you, but also your descendants. If any of you do not wish to bear this burden, leave now. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Then, a few men bolted, disappearing into the forest like frightened animals. The goddess didn't even glance at them as they fled. Good, she said, her eyes now fixed on Kato. Kato, step forward. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. Kabo's legs wobbled, his body betraying him. He took a shaky step, then another, feeling the eyes of the goddess boring into him. Sweat trickled down his back, but he couldn't stop now, not in front of her. From this moment, the goddess declared, her voice booming, you will be known as Kato the Great, the first of the hunters. From your bloodline, leaders will rise, heroes who will guide my people through the ages. Kato bowed so low he could feel the earth beneath his forehead. You honor me, great goddess, he managed to say. The goddess nodded, but her gaze sharpened. There is something you wish to ask, Kato, she said. Speak. Kato swallowed hard, his mouth dry, his heart beating fast in his chest, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. Before we accept your gift, he began, there is the matter of the snake people. They hunt humans and consume them. Can anything be done about this primal hunger and thirst? The goddess's eyes darkened. She seemed to consider his words for a moment, and then she spoke. That is a matter for a higher power than I, she said, her voice colder now, more distant. But for now, Kato the Great, your time has come. With a flick of her hand, the air around them tore open, revealing a swirling vortex of light and shadow. The wind howled through the clearing, and the pull of the vortex tugged at Kato, beckoning him forward. Step into the vortex, Kato, the goddess commanded, and claim your gift. Every instinct in Kato screamed to run, but he forced himself to take one step, then another. The world around him seemed to twist and blur as he entered the vortex, the air crackling with energy. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. This was it. There was no going back. Meanwhile, Mambo burst out of the temple, his heart racing. He had felt a tremor beneath his feet. It had been subtle but unmistakable. Had a pillar fallen during construction? The temple project was already behind schedule. There could be no more setbacks. But as he stepped outside, his worries about the temple vanished. In the distance, a dark cloud reaching to the heavens. A cold chill swept over him. He recognized the strange energy it emitted, faint yet familiar. He had felt it once before, the day he received the snake gift. The same ominous force lingered in the air, thick and unsettling. Summon the family, Mabo said sharply to Eli, his younger brother, who was nearby. His voice tense, urgent. We must prepare. Something big is coming. Zoro and Sia stood at the base of the mountain, the path ahead winding up into the darkening sky. If they started now, they would be back before midnight. For most, the climb would take hours, but these weren't ordinary men. Zoro and Sia were demigods, and the summit was just another obstacle they would conquer with ease.
Zoro, is that you?
A soft voice drifted through the air, faint but familiar. Zoro froze. It sounded like Tando, Sia's mother, a voice he hadn't heard in years. Did you hear that? Zoro asked, turning to Sia. Hear what? Sia looked confused, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings.
Zoro?
The voice whispered again, gentle but insistent.
Zoro, we have much to discuss.
Zoro cleared his throat, uneasy. We should split up, Sia. I'll take this path. You go the other way. We'll meet at the top. Father, the mission is already dangerous. Splitting up isn't an option. Sia shook his head. Besides, we need to be back before midnight. You know the mermaids. If we don't get the flowers in time, they'll keep Tendai down there for good. That's exactly why we're wasting time right now discussing. Zoro's voice hardened. I'll see you at the top. Before Xia could protest, Zoro disappeared into the trees, leaving him standing there, stunned. What had gotten into his father? Zoro's mind was racing. He wasn't just chasing the mission now. He was chasing the voice of Tando. If he could find her, he'd finally apologize, thank her for giving him Xia and Tendai. He didn't deserve them, but they were his greatest gift. Meanwhile, Xia remained rooted to the spot, torn between concern for his father and their mission. Then, he heard it too. A soft, strange voice that seemed to echo in his ears.
Xia, we have much to discuss.
Palesa, Xia muttered under his breath, recognition hitting him like a punch. Their last meeting had been a disaster, a conversation he'd replayed over and over, regretting every word. Now he had a chance to make things right.
We have much to discuss, my love,
the voice said again, coaxing him forward. Driven by guilt and longing, Saya began walking toward the voice. He could make it right. He could apologize, and then he'd scale the mountain in record time. He just had to find her first. Both men moved in separate directions, drawn by the voices of their pasts. They were so focused on finding the source of the whispers that they lost all sense of time. The mountain shadows deepened, but they didn't notice. As they drew closer to the voices, they seemed to slip further away, pulling them deeper into the forest. From above, a figure watched them. The witch, cloaked in the night, smiled as she saw her plan take shape. She had managed to separate the two hunters, and now she would deal with them one by one. Leaping into the air, she transformed into a massive lion, her powerful paws crushing the earth as she landed. Her golden eyes gleamed with malice. Without warning, she pounced in front of Xia, her roar shaking the very mountain. The sound snapped Xia out of his trance. His hunter instincts kicked in. He unsheathed his sword with lightning speed, his eyes narrowing as he faced the beast. The lion roared again, louder this time, its massive claws scraping the ground. Xia moved like a shadow, fast and precise, dodging the first swipe with the grace of a true hunter. His sword sliced through the air as he struck at the lion's flank, but the beast was too quick. It countered with a powerful swipe, knocking the sword from Xia's hand. It flew through the air, clattering to the ground far from his reach. The lion bared its teeth, ready to deliver the final blow. The witch had seen Zoro. From the corner of her eye. She had more tricks to play. In an instant, she shifted, her lion form melting into a small bat. With a high-pitched screech, she darted away from the scene, leaving Zoro's sword suspended in mid-air, aimed directly at Xia's heart. She wanted Zoro to end Xia. Xia reacted in the blink of an eye, rolling to the side, as Zoro's blade crashed into the ground where he had lay just seconds earlier, sending a shower of dirt into the air.
So close.
The witch's voice echoed from the darkness, filled with cruel delight.
See you at the top.
Her laughter faded as she vanished into the night, leaving father and son breathless, the weight of what almost happened hanging between them. They were running out of time, and the mountain still loomed ahead. Jeno had been uneasy all day. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. He ordered a search for Nala the moment he noticed her absence. She had scanned out of the building, her vehicle parked near the beach where the snake people had gathered after the recent fight. Why did she go there? Samuel asked, though both men already knew the answer. Jeno didn't respond, unwilling to say it aloud. Speaking into his device, he barked orders to the two hunters on the move. Let me know as soon as you've made contact. Nandi stood nearby, her heart pounding with fear. Her mind raced with all the terrible possibilities of what could have happened to Nala. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. The reply came through, snapping everyone to attention. She's not here, sir. Her scent leads into the forest. Jeno froze, momentarily stunned by the news. The forest? What was she doing there? Hold your position. I'm on my way. He leapt into action, his voice steady but urgent. Samuel, get a car, be discreet. The hunters are already on edge. I'll go with you, Nandi offered, her voice panicked. No, Jeno replied firmly. You need to stay here and keep the operations running. If word gets out to the others, the council might demand I step down. A leader who cannot protect and control his own family cannot lead the hunters. Nandi knew he was right. The council would pounce on any weakness. May the goddess be with you, she whispered as Jeno disappeared into the corridors. Minutes later, Jeno, Samuel and the two hunters stood at the edge of the forest. Jeno gave the command, and the group began following Nala's scent trail, moving swiftly but silently through the underbrush, every step bringing them closer to the unknown. Meanwhile, deep within the forest, a woman knelt before a group of figures. "Queen Amina, look what we found," one of them said, pushing the woman forward. Amina, regal and cold, smiled with quiet satisfaction. "What is your name, hunter?" "Nala," she replied, her voice steady but her eyes glowing with the unmistakable fire of her ancestors' blood. "Take her to the cells," Amina commanded, her eyes gleaming with dangerous curiosity. "I'll visit her shortly." As Nala was dragged away, it was clear she had been in a brutal fight. Her body was weakened, injuries slowing her steps, but her spirit remained unbroken. Queen Amina watched her with amusement. There was no doubt in her mind. Nala had been through something fierce. As Nala was dragged further into the camp, her gaze swept across the crowd, and then she saw him. Kwame. Her heart jolted in shock, disbelief flooding her senses. There he was, sitting comfortably among their sworn enemies. Their eyes met for a brief, electrifying moment. Kwame quickly looked down, unable to hold her gaze, shame washing over his face. Nala's mind raced, confusion and betrayal twisting in her gut. How could he be here? How could he stand the smell of them? What kind of hunter abandons his brothers in battle? Her anger flared, but beneath it, a deeper wound cut into her. Whatever was happening here, it was far worse than she had imagined. She had been foolish coming here at all. And that, my dear tribe members, did that last one hit you like a thunderbolt, or was it just me? But there's no time to rest. We're plunging straight into episode 6, The First Hunt. Let's see how the chase begins. Kato stared at the distant clouds, curiosity burning in his eyes. Something was off. The energy in the air was familiar but unsettling. Is the goddess back? He wondered. Without hesitation, he shifted into his true form, a colossal snake. Whatever it was, he would find out, and fast. He slithered forward with incredible speed, cutting through the dense forest. Meanwhile, in a nearby clearing, a group of hunters stood looking at each other in awe. The goddess had vanished but had left them with a gift. Each held a bow and arrow, but their once frail bodies had transformed. Muscles bulged, their skin rippled with power. They felt more alive than ever before. Excitement brewed in their eyes, but then a scent filled the air. It was intoxicating, sending their blood rushing, their hearts pounding. Their eyes gleamed with an unnatural red glow. They didn't understand it until they spotted the massive snake emerging from the forest. Kato entered the clearing and froze. The sight before him was bizarre. Who were these giants? Before he could make sense of it, an arrow whizzed by, grazing his head. Kato recoiled, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the source. One of the hunters, Kabo the Great, grinning from ear to ear. Next time, Kabo thought to himself, I'll aim better. Let the hunt begin, Kabo's voice boomed across the clearing. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. The hunters sprang into action, their powerful legs launching them forward with unnatural speed. Kato was unprepared. Arrows flew in the air, narrowly missing him. He darted and weaved through the trees, but he couldn't escape them all. Kabo the Great paused, watching the frenzy unfold. Wanting to test his skill, he stood still, bow in hand. He drew an arrow, his eyes fixed on where he anticipated the snake would be next. He took a deep breath, steadied himself, then released. The arrow sliced through the air with precision and struck Kato squarely. With a deafening crash, Kato fell to the ground. Meanwhile, Mambo stood before his family. They had all seen it, the ominous cloud in the sky, and felt the strange energy in the air. But where was Kato? Mambo looked to his older brother for reassurance. Where is Kato? Mambo asked, concern etched on his face. Before anyone could answer, a young boy burst into the room, gasping for breath. "They got Kato! They got him!" Mambo frowned, confused. "Calm down. What are you talking about?" "Kato's gone," the boy cried. "The giants took his life." Mambo's blood ran cold. He and several others moved with lightning speed, rushing to the scene. When they arrived, the sight shattered Mambo's heart. There, on the forest floor, lay Kato, naked, alone, lifeless. Dropping to his knees, Mambo's chest tightened in agony. Who dared to harm his brother, his confidant, and his friend? His fists clenched as he noticed the massive footprints, the unmistakable tracks of the hunters. Mambo stood, his face a mask of cold determination. He would not cry for his fallen brother. Not yet. Not until he had avenged him. This was just the beginning. A war was coming, one that would rage for centuries. The snake goddess watched in horror as the hunters claimed their first victim. Their aim was still off, but she knew it wouldn't be long before they perfected their skills. That would spell disaster for her people. She paced back and forth in her mansion, the excitement of the party that had once filled her home now a distant memory. She needed to act. There was only one option left. She would have to confront the hunter goddess. The snake goddess had never visited the domain of a first-tier god or goddess before. As she approached the hunter goddess's mansion, she was stunned. The sheer size of the place made her own mansion feel like a simple house in comparison. It was surrounded by a vast forest, the perfect hunting ground fit for a hunter goddess, and the mansion itself was grand, with servants at every turn. A servant approached her as she entered. "You can wait here," he said, gesturing towards a study. "I will let her know you're here." The snake goddess stepped inside, her eyes widening at the elegance of the room. Every detail had been crafted with care, and the beauty of the place left her in awe. But her thoughts were interrupted by a cold, sharp voice. "Goddess," the hunter goddess said, stepping into the room. "What brings you here?" The snake goddess hesitated, unsure of what to say. "Congratulations on your appointment," she finally managed to say. The hunter goddess raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "You came all this way just to congratulate me?" "No," the snake goddess admitted, her voice faltering. "I came to ask for mercy for my people." The hunter goddess narrowed her eyes, her gaze cold and unyielding. "Mercy?" The snake goddess took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "I wasn't privileged to be created as a goddess of needs like yourself. I've made mistakes, I've been punished, but I've learned. I'm asking for my sake, please spare my people." The hunter goddess crossed her arms, her expression hard. "You should have thought of that earlier. When your people harmed humans in your name, you did nothing. You sat back and enjoyed the benefits, didn't you?" The snake goddess lowered her head, shame washing over her. The hunter goddess was right. She had let greed blind her, and now the consequences had arrived. "My people are hunters," the hunter goddess said, her voice firm and unrelenting. "And they will hunt. There will be no mercy." The snake goddess looked up, her eyes pleading, but the hunter goddess's face had grown even more serious. "This is my divine assignment, and I will make sure I execute it with the highest level of efficiency. You should do the same, snake goddess. May the best goddess win." The intensity in her words left no room for negotiation. The snake goddess nodded, feeling a wave of weakness overcome her. Her legs trembled beneath her, barely able to support her weight. The war had begun, and there was no stopping it now. Her heart broke for Kato. Maybe if she had been a better goddess, none of this would have happened. Tendai felt the cool water rise to his knees as he walked hand in hand with Mami Abeni. His heart raced, not just from the cold, but from the unfamiliar world he was about to enter. Behind him, his father and grandfathers stood on the shore, their faces stern as they prepared for their mission. He wanted to look back, to wish them the goddess's protection, but he forced himself to focus. The water was creeping higher, and this was no ordinary sea. He was stepping into a world unknown to him. Mami Abeni's hand was firm, a steadying comfort amidst the swirling nerves in his chest. "Close your eyes, Tendai," she whispered, her voice soft and calm. "Breathe in and out, like you're on land." Tendai obeyed, squeezing her hand tighter as he drew deep, slow breaths. His pulse gradually steadied. "Now," Mermaid said, "open your eyes." Tendai blinked, and what he saw took his breath away. The marine world unfolded before him in a way he could never have imagined. Beautiful, gleaming houses of coral and shell dotted the landscape, surrounded by lush underwater gardens that swayed with the current. Fish of all colors darted between the buildings, and children with shimmering tails, laughed and played in the open water, chasing one another in a game Tendai couldn't quite understand. He smiled at them, his heart lifting. "Can I go and play with them?" he asked, turning to Mermaid. She chuckled softly. "Maybe later, but first we must announce your arrival to the Queen." Tendai's eyes widened in surprise. "The Queen?" he asked, startled. Mermaid's expression turned serious. "Yes, Mamiwata. When we are before her, do not speak unless she speaks to you first. Understand?" Tendai nodded, now even more curious and afraid of this mysterious queen. Inside the palace, they were led to a large hall, and there, seated on a throne of polished shells and emerald stones, was Mamiwata herself. She was a striking figure, her long, flowing hair cascading down her shoulders, her dark eyes piercing as they studied Tendai. There was beauty in her presence, but also a cold, intense darkness that made Tendai uneasy. "This is the boy." Mamiwata's voice was soft yet commanding as she addressed Mermaid. "Yes, this is him," Mermaid replied, bowing deeply. Mamiwata's gaze shifted to Tendai, her eyes narrowing as if she were peering into his soul. "What is your name?" she asked. "Tendai," he whispered. Mermaid's voice cut through sharply. "Speak up." "Tendai," he repeated, louder this time. The Queen's lips curved into a small smile. "And who is your mother?" Tendai's face tightened. "I don't know. My father. He doesn't speak about her." Mamiwata nodded thoughtfully. "Have you transformed yet?" Tendai knew what she meant. He had tried before, tried to call on the snake within him, but he had failed. "No," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I tried, but I couldn't reach it." For a moment, the Queen said nothing. Then she spoke again, her tone serious. "You are welcome here, Tendai of the Hunters and the Snake People. But know this, your father and grandfather are on a mission for me. If they fail, you may have to stay here, indefinitely." Tendai's stomach churned at her words. He bowed low, mimicking the way Mermaid had done. "You can go and play now," Mermaid said, her voice gentle once more. Tendai didn't need to be told twice. He darted off to join the mermaid children, his worries temporarily forgotten as he dove into their games. In this underwater world, he wasn't the strange boy who hissed. He was just a child, laughing and playing like the others. And for a brief moment, as he swam and laughed, Tendai thought about what Mamiwata had said. If his father and grandfather failed to come back on time, he might stay here. And maybe, just maybe, that wouldn't be so bad. He could live here, no longer a burden to his father and grandfather. The day Amina woke up and addressed her people, she had scanned the crowd, her voice steady but her mind racing. Amidst the sea of faces, her eyes were drawn to a man standing quietly in the crowd. He looked familiar, but she couldn't place him. After the speech, Amina slipped away to the forest, seeking solitude to clear her head. There was so much to think about. How would she lead her people now that Asa was gone? She needed answers, but they seemed just out of reach. "Excuse me, Amina," a deep voice cut through her thoughts. Amina spun around, startled. A tall man stood behind her, his presence both unsettling and intriguing. "I'm Lunga," he said. "I knew your mother." A rush of questions flooded Amina's mind, but she held back, her heart racing. Instead, she asked calmly, "Do I know you?" "We met once when you were young," Lunga replied, "but I doubt you remember." "I heard about your victory in the tunnels." "Congratulations," Amina wanted to correct him. That victory was all Asa's, but Lunga continued, his voice calm and assured. "I promised your mother I would be by your side, If you would allow it. Amina hesitated. Could she trust this stranger? Let me show you something, Lunga said when he sensed Amina's hesitation. He led her deeper into the woods. 2 guards followed in the distance. She knew she was safe. They walked in silence until they reached a small cabin hidden away from the rest of the camp. He pulled out a key and unlocked the door, revealing a room filled with books, maps, and other relics. This is where your mother came to escape the chaos, Lunga said, placing the key in her hand. Amina smiled, tears welling up in her eyes. Thank you, Lunga, she whispered. She had been so unsure of where to begin leading her people, and now it seemed her mother had left her a path to follow. Back in the present, Kwame knelt before Amina and Lunga. There was tension in the air. You spent considerable time with the hunters, Kwame, Lunga said, his voice low and demanding. Do you know this girl? Kwame's head hung low, shame written all over his face. Yes. Why is she here alone? Amina asked, her voice sharp. Kwame hesitated, clearly struggling with his answer. I don't know, he mumbled. Lunga's patience was wearing thin. What do you know about her? After a long pause, Kwame finally spoke. She's the daughter of Jeno, the leader of the hunters. The revelation hit Amina like a punch to the gut. This was no ordinary girl. They were in danger. The hunters would be looking for her. Lunga's gaze darkened as he leaned closer to Kwame, his voice a growl. Why is the hunter princess here, Kwame, alone? Kwame shifted uncomfortably. We had a thing. I had no idea she'd come looking for me. Lunga shook his head, springing into action. The hunters may already know where we are, he said, his voice urgent. We need to prepare. He moved quickly, stepping outside to ensure the guards were on high alert, making sure the girl was guarded as securely as possible. But even as Lunga organized their defenses, 4 sets of glowing eyes watched from the shadows of the forest. Their mission was clear: extract Nala and get out. But as they observed the compound, it became clear that their task would not be easy. The people inside moved as if they sensed the hunter's presence, and the tension in the air told them this mission would be far harder than they had anticipated. The hunt was on. Every story leaves a mark, doesn't it? A whisper, a chill, or maybe a spark. Tribe. Did this one awaken something within you? Let's carry that feeling forward into episode 7, a warning from the gods. Shall we heed their warning? Our brother lost his life like a hunted dog. A god brought low and left on the forest floor to rot. Mambo's voice boomed across the gathered snake people, trembling with fury. His fists were clenched, his chest heaving, as the crowd stood silent before him. Kato, one of our own, dragged through the dirt, his blood staining the ground like he was nothing. Mambo's eyes blazed with rage. Is this how it ends? Us gods, hunted as animals? The crowd stirred, anger rising with every word, like embers catching fire. We will burn their lands. We will find their family lineage to the very young amongst them, and we will spill their blood. We will show them that gods do not fall without dragging the world down with them. Mambo's voice cracked with raw emotion as he pointed toward the horizon. When we are done, they will whisper our names in fear, knowing that no one escapes the wrath of a god. The crowd roared in agreement, their anger ignited. The grief that had weighed them down began to twist into something darker, something deadly. They weren't just mourning anymore, they were preparing for war. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. Across the land inside a dark cave, the hunters gathered. Cabo the Great stood before them, his expression proud but cautious. We did it, he said, his voice calm but firm. The goddess gave us a chance, and we took it. We ended the life of one of the snake people. But make no mistake, this was not a victory to be proud of. The hunters, still breathless from their victory, leaned in closer to listen. That snake was fast. Too fast. Cabo continued, his voice growing darker. He almost made it back to his people. How many arrows did we shoot at that serpent, missing the mark every time? If we aren't sharper, stronger, we won't survive what's coming. Murmurs of agreement spread through the group. "They are coming for us, and when they do, they will bring all their fury," Cabo warned. "If we are weak, even for a second, the goddess's gift will have been wasted." The hunters nodded in agreement. Cabo raised his fist. "We must train harder, faster, because when they strike, we will be ready. We are hunters, and hunters must never back down." The cave filled with a resounding roar of agreement, the sound of it echoing off the stone walls like a promise. Back in the Snake People's camp, the mood had shifted sharply. Suddenly, one of Mambo's scouts burst through the gathering, dragging an old man behind him. The stranger was beaten and bloodied, but his eyes burned with defiance. The scout shoved the old man to the ground at Mambo's feet. "We found him picking herbs near the border. He's a healer from the north," the scout said, "and he's the one who summoned the hunter goddess." The crowd gasped, rage flickering like wildfire through their ranks. Mambo crouched low, meeting the old man's gaze, his eyes filled with cold fury. "Who are you?" Mambo hissed. "What are those creatures you unleashed on us?" The old man chuckled, even as blood dripped from his lips.
My name means nothing to you, but I have waited for this day all my life, for it was foretold that my head would fall to a man-turned-snake.
Mambo's eyes narrowed. His hands twitched, ready to strike, but the old man kept talking.
For years the prophecy made no sense, but now I see it clearly. It was foretold that mine will be the last blood you will ever drink, for it will turn poison. It will drive you mad until you destroy yourselves.
The crowd scoffed. The old man had gone mad, saying things that did not make any sense. The old man's smile widened, filled with both pity and triumph.
Those hunters are not ordinary men. They are divine vengeance, retribution for all the blood you have spilled. They are the gods' answer to your arrogance, and they will end you.
Mambo's expression darkened, but a flicker of unease flashed in his eyes. For a brief moment, the healer's words unsettled him, but only for a moment. "If they are divine," Mambo whispered, "then let them meet true power." Without warning, Mambo transformed into a massive snake. Before anyone could react or ponder on the words spoken by the old man, Mambo struck. His fangs gleamed in the dying light as they sliced through the old man's neck, separating his head from his body in an instant. The crowd gasped, frozen in shock, as the prophecy came true right before their eyes. The Snake People had heard the warning, but chose to ignore. For it is said, the gods always warn before they strike. Such is the way of the gods. Let me tell you a story about the entity called the Guardian of the Forest. The guardian spirit was created by the forest god himself. Some called her a witch, whispering her name with fear. But she was far more than the stories told. She was the heart and soul of the forest itself. With her presence, the ancient woods thrived, holding a fragile balance between light and darkness. Without her, the shadows grew bold, creeping through the trees and twisting the forest into a place of nightmares. But as long as the guardian stood, peace reigned, and both good and evil knew their place. When a guardian met their end, their spirit drifted through the woods like a restless storm, searching for a new vessel to restore balance. Without the guardian, the forest would descend into chaos, shadows growing longer, and creatures lurking in the dark becoming bold. To summon a new guardian, a healer would perform an ancient ceremony, for the forest demanded a soul pure of heart, untouched by greed or malice. A child was often chosen, innocent, unaware of the burden that awaited them. When the guardian spirit took hold, the child ceased to be their own. Their eyes darkened with ancient knowledge, their voice became a whisper on the wind, and their heart beat with the pulse of the forest. They became more than human, a vessel of balance, a watcher, a force beyond mortal understanding. Each guardian, throughout the ages, was bound to protect something sacred, sometimes a tree, sometimes a waterfall, sometimes a single flower. What she chose became the heart of the forest, and she would guard it with her life. The magic she carried allowed her to take any shape she wished, a bird in the canopy, a wolf at night, or even a tiger with eyes that glowed like fire. If those who wandered too close feared a witch, she let them believe it. But if fear was not enough, she became something far greater, something that could tear intruders apart. The flower she guarded was unlike any other. It carried the power of both creation and destruction, the raw magic of the forest itself. In the right hands, it could heal the sick, bring back life, and cleanse the darkest souls. But in the wrong hands, it would unleash horrors beyond imagination, spreading ruin like wildfire. Many came searching for the flower, thieves, kings, and desperate souls, but few lived to tell the tale. Some returned broken with stories of a beast with golden eyes that hunted without mercy. Others vanished, swallowed whole by the forest as if it had grown teeth. The Guardian was not a hero, nor was she a villain. She was the balance, the watcher, and the heart of the forest. And so the legend warned, if you dare enter the heart of the forest, tread lightly. You may meet a witch or you may meet the beast. Either way, the Guardian will decide your fate. And if she finds you unworthy, not even the trees will remember your name. The Guardian of the Forest stood tall at the mountain's peak, her eyes fixed on Zoro and Seer as they approached. A sly smile crept across her face.
I wonder what I should turn into. Maybe a dragon. I could burn you both to ashes.
We mean no disrespect, Guardian. We have a problem that needs solving, and the flower you protect is our only hope. We only wish to take a few and return before our time runs out. We don't want to fight you, Guardian, but if we must, we will. Zoro tightened his grip on his sword, ready for anything.
I cannot let you take the flower.
The Guardian replied, her voice serious.
The entity who sent you will use its power in ways I cannot allow. I know why you are here, hunters, and I understand that if we fight, blood will be spilled on this mountain tonight. Yours or maybe mine.
The Guardian paused, contemplating.
I will make you an offer. Whatever the mermaids have promised you, I will match it.
Seer's eyes widened in shock. How then do we convince Mamiwata to give Tendai back? The Guardian's gaze softened.
I can give you something similar, but not the same. Its glow will last, but only for a short time. After midnight, the flower will turn to dust in the hands of whoever holds it.
Zoro and Seer exchanged glances. This was better than fighting for their lives, with no guarantee of survival. Okay, Zoro said, relief washing over him. We accept your terms. They thanked the Guardian and rushed down the mountain, knowing time was against them. They needed to reach the river quickly. When they arrived, Mami Abeni awaited them. I heard the roar of the lion on the mountain and feared you might not return. I take it the Guardian is no more? Seer's heart sank as she looked around. Where is Tendai? Mami Abeni's eyes sparkled with mischief. The Queen would like to see you. You can present the flowers to her personally. Fear settled over them as they looked at the moon, then at each other. What if the flowers turned to dust before they reached the Queen? Their hearts raced as they submerged into the water, knowing they had no choice. They had to rescue Tendai, no matter the cost. As they approached the Queen, Tendai stood before her, relief washing over him. He smiled at the sight of Zoro and Seer. Seer rushed to him, embracing him tightly. When we leave here, we must leave like hunters, Seer whispered, a joke between them, meaning they would escape fast without questions. Tendai nodded his head, understanding the command. A family reunion. How charming, Mamiwata said, her voice dripping with irony. Where is my gift? Zoro bowed, presenting her with a pouch containing the flowers. What of the witch? I take it she did not survive? If the Queen would allow it, we ask that we leave, Zoro said, bowing again. Mamiwata's brow furrowed. There is the matter of Tendai and binding the snake within. I'm afraid the process cannot be rushed. My Queen, Seer interjected, when a man survives a battle, life comes into full perspective. We realize that Tendai does not need to change who he is, but instead live in his truth. Tendai wanted to speak, but his father's painful grip on his shoulder silenced him. The Queen smiled thoughtfully. Indeed, that is a noble thought. Thank you for the flower. I am in your debt. The three of them bowed deeply before racing away. But as they fled, an uneasy feeling stirred within the queen. Something was off. With a flick of her wrist, she opened the pouch again, her heart racing with excitement. Many had fallen trying to retrieve this flower, and now it was finally in her hands. But confusion washed over her as the flower's vibrant colors began to fade, turning to ash. She screamed, a sound that echoed through the night, reaching Zorro and Sia as they surfaced from the water. They had escaped, but they had made a very powerful enemy. Cabo and his team huddled in the shadows, their hearts racing. "The compound is on high alert," Cabo whispered sharply. "We need to wait until it calms down." They watched the compound as hours went by, the early morning light creeping in. Some guards were asleep, while others wandered around, talking quietly. "This could be a trap," Samuel said, worry in his voice. "Agreed," Cabo replied, his eyes scanning the compound. They had pinpointed the cabin where Amina was held. As they entered, they launched a silent and precise attack on the guards inside. Nala's eyes widened in disbelief. "Father?" she asked, relieved. She could not believe her eyes. She wanted to apologize for disobeying her father, but there was no time for that now. Quickly, they untied Amina from the shackles binding her. She stumbled forward, supported by Samuel and another hunter. Just as Jeno was about to exit the cabin, a massive figure blocked the doorway, trapping him inside. "Well, if it isn't the legend himself, Jeno. I had a feeling you would come here yourself," Lunga said. Jeno was too stunned to speak. "Condolences on the sudden death of your brother. I heard he just fell in the street, 1 minute healthy, and the next gone. Such a shame they don't make hunters like they used to in the old days. Now they are just weak," he mocked. "I could say the same to you," Jeno replied. "Black Rose had so much life in her. What sucked the life out of her young one day and rapidly aged her the next?" Lunga hissed. Jeno had struck a nerve. Jeno was right. Black Rose had sacrificed years of her life so Amina could live a normal life, free from the burden of her gift. But it had come at a huge cost. That, my dear tribe members, is a story for another day. Lunga bared his fangs and backed out of the cabin. His snake form could not fit in the confined space. Jeno unsheathed his sword, ready for a fight. Nala looked back, panic rising in her voice. "Where is father?" She realized he had been left behind. Samuel grabbed her arm. "He's coming. We need to go. Now." The sounds of the snake people grew louder, their hisses echoing in the air. "Run, Nala. This is what your father wanted." With tears streaming down her face, Nala ran faster than ever before, her heart racing. Back at the compound, Jeno faced a circle of snake people, their eyes filled with anger. "I demand a duel!" he shouted, voice strong and clear. The snake people stopped, staring at Lunga. "I thought you would never ask," Lunga said with a smile, "but not against you." "Who then?" "I choose Kwame," Jeno replied, looking directly at Kwame. Jeno stepped closer to Kwame, so close he could see the blood flow in his veins. "I want to see you turn into the snake you are." "So be it," Queen Amina called out from a distance, her voice steady. "You will have your duel at sunset." The crowd murmured with discontent. "He should die now," they shouted, frustration rising. But Amina stood firm. Ending Jeno's life was not a decision to make lightly. The duel would buy them time. She needed to summon the snake goddess and let her decide Jeno's fate, knowing that whatever happened next could change everything. They say every tale has its own pulse, its own heartbeat. These stories, they're alive, and they're drawing us deeper. Let's not stop now. Episode 8. Blood Turned Poison is next. The morning silence was torn apart by Maria's scream. The sound carried through the stone corridors, sending the snake people into a panic. They rushed to her chambers, their hearts beating fast. Maria stood in the room, her face pale, her hands trembling as she pointed toward the figure in the corner, Mambo. He was hunched over, his body drenched in sweat, his breaths coming in shallow, uneven gasps. It was clear he hadn't slept, not even for a moment. Maria's voice quivered as she explained, "He's been sick all night. Now he won't stop scratching his head." I thought he would stop. Now he is getting worse. Mambo clawed at his head, his nails raking against his scalp, as though trying to dig something out. His movements were desperate, wild, like a caged animal desperate for escape. Eli entered, his heart sinking at the sight of his brother. "Mambo!" he called. "Brother, what's gotten into you?" He knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders, trying to shake him back to reality. But Mambo's eyes were distant, glassy, as if he wasn't there with them anymore. His hands continued to scratch at his head, the sound of nails scraping skin filling the room. Then, without warning, he began slamming his head against the wall. Once, twice. Over and over, the sickening thud filled the chamber. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. "Stop him!" Eli shouted, his voice desperate. "Tie him up before he hurts himself." The others hesitated, frozen by the sheer terror of the scene unfolding before them. Finally, two men stepped forward, ropes in hand, and restrained Mambo, binding his hands and feet as he thrashed and screamed. "What's happening?" one of them asked, his voice trembling. Eli's mind raced as the warning surfaced, the prophecy.
Mine will be the last blood you will ever drink, for it will turn poison. It will drive you mad until you destroy yourselves.
Eli looked at Mambo, who was now writhing against his bindings, his head lolling side to side. His brother had drunk the blood of the old man. Maria's voice broke through his thoughts. "Oh, what do we do, Eli? What do we do?" Eli straightened, his face grim. "Spread the word to the snake people in all corners of the world," he commanded. "No one hunts," he declared. "No one drinks the blood from the people again. Not a drop of blood, not a single life. The curse is real, and it will destroy us all." Eli turned back to his brother, who lay bound and convulsing violently on the floor. "Mambo! Mambo!" Maria screamed, and then Mambo stopped. The curse had been awakened, and it had claimed its first victim. Eli knelt on the ground next to his brother, his heart shattered into pieces. He had lost two brothers almost within the same day, and now he had no choice but to lead the snake people into a battle with an enemy he knew so little about. Cabo the Great stood tall in the heart of the forest. Around him the hunters moved with purpose. The training grounds had come alive. Arrows zipped through the air, striking their wooden targets with thuds. Spears flew, slicing through the wind, landing closer to their marks with each throw. Cabo's eyes scanned the scene, and for a moment a small smile crept across his face. Not long ago, these men and women had been clumsy, like children taking their first steps. Their bulky muscles had been more of a hindrance than a weapon, their movements awkward and unfocused. But now, they were beginning to transform. Their aim was sharper, their steps lighter, their bodies faster. Cabo could see it, the beginnings of a disciplined force. But they weren't there yet, not even close. Cabo's smile faded, replaced by the stern, calculating expression of a leader burdened with the weight of what lay ahead. The battle against the snake people. The snake people were ruthless, cunning, and terrifyingly quick. If his hunters had any hope of winning, they had to push themselves harder. They had to become more precise, more coordinated. They had to be unstoppable. He walked among them, his commanding presence silencing whispers and sharpening focus. Cabo's voice boomed through the clearing like thunder. "You've come far," he said, his words deliberate and heavy. "But far isn't enough." The hunters paused, their eyes on him. "We are not the hunted anymore," he continued. "We no longer hide in caves, cowering in fear. Those days are behind us. We are hunters now. Warriors, and warriors do not fail their goddess." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. "The snake people will not show us mercy. If we are not better than them, faster, stronger, smarter, we will fall." He stepped closer to the nearest hunter, a young man whose breathing was still ragged from the training. Cabo placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You," he said, locking eyes with him, "will be the one they fear in the dark." He turned to the others. "And you," he pointed to a woman sharpening her spear, "will strike so swiftly they won't know they've been hit." The energy in the clearing shifted. The hunters felt the sting of running for their lives. living in caves, avoiding the snake people, and succumbing to diseases. But now they were ready to reclaim their place in the world. Kabo let the silence linger before delivering his final words. We are the people's last hope. We must protect their honor, their freedom, their future. The hunters stood taller. They had no choice but to win the battle ahead. As Kabo turned back toward the dense forest, he allowed himself a fleeting moment of pride. But the snake people would not be easily defeated. And Kabo the Great knew the hardest days were still ahead. Tendai lay flat on the ground, his body still, his eyes fixed on the stars above. Around him the air pulsed with energy. The forest was alive, its heartbeat beating beneath him like a steady drum. The guardian of the forest loomed over him, her presence ancient and powerful. She began to sing a haunting melody, an old song carried through generations. Zoro and Sia knelt a short distance away, their heads bowed, their faces tense. They knew what this ritual meant, not just for Tendai, but for all of them. Tendai's heart grew heavy with sadness. The snake within him wasn't just a curse, it was a part of him. It had been there from birth. But tonight, he had made his choice. He would let the snake go. He would become a hunter, like his father and grandfather before him. There was no world where he could be both. A bitter thought surfaced as the guardian chanted, "Why should I honor her?" The memory of his mother stung. She left me. Why should I care about the snake she passed to me? His jaw tightened, bitterness hardening in his young heart. The guardian spoke, her words ancient and commanding. The wind shifted, swirling around them. It wasn't just wind anymore. It was the voice of the god of the forest. It spoke through the leaves, through the rustling branches.
I approve the binding of the snake for 7 generations.
The forest god declared.
But after that, it will return, as promised.
Tendai gasped as the snake inside began to move, its presence thrashing in his veins, fighting against the ritual. Pain tore through his body. His muscles tensed, his fingers clawing at the dirt beneath him. The snake didn't want to leave. The snake wanted to stay. The guardian raised her voice. "Do not harm the boy," she commanded, her tone like thunder. "We do not seek to destroy you, only to preserve you. You will have your time again, bigger, stronger. But tonight you must let the boy live as a hunter." Tendai convulsed, his body writhing as if caught in an invisible battle. He felt the snake's transformation coming at him, but it was just out of reach. The snake's power surged, twisting his insides. "Leave him," the guardian roared, her voice booming through the clearing, "or you will be banished forever." Then Tendai let out a scream. From his body, the snake emerged, shimmering and translucent, rising into the air like a specter. Tendai's body stopped suddenly, and a silence fell over the forest. Zoro and Sia's eyes widened as they watched. The guardian wasted no time. She stepped forward, her hands steady as she raised a small pot. With swift precision, she trapped the snake inside and slammed the lid shut. "The snake has been bound," she declared, her voice calm yet firm. She turned to Zoro and Sia, holding the pot. "The boy is free." The 2 men exhaled, their shoulders sagging in relief. Still, worry lingered in their eyes as they glanced at Tendai's motionless body. The guardian noticed. "Do not fear," she said gently. "He is alive. He just needs rest. You may return for him tomorrow. There are still things I must finish with him." Zoro hesitated, but Sia placed a hand on his shoulder, nodding. The 2 men stood and bowed before retreating into the darkness of the forest. The guardian turned back to Tendai, who now drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. The future had been sealed. The snake would remain hidden for 7 generations, its curse waiting to awaken in someone else. But for now, Tendai was free. She placed the pot in a secure place. If she didn't live to see the fulfillment of the 7 generations, the next guardian would know what to do. Tendai's breathing slowed, his body finally at peace. The battle was over, for him at least, but somewhere deep in the shadows of the forest, the god's words lingered.
The snake will return.
Amina knelt in the heart of the forest, a book in her hands. The old pages were worn, the ink faded in places, but she traced the words carefully, her heart pounding. This was no ordinary task. She was about to summon the snake goddess. Her fingers paused over a warning in bold letters. Only summon her if it is absolutely necessary. It was a caution left by Black Rose, but necessity had brought Amina here. This was no time for hesitation. She took a deep breath and whispered the ancient incantation. The air around her began to twist, a whirlwind materializing out of nothing. The wind roared, carrying the scent of earth and decay. From within the vortex, a figure stepped forward, her form shimmering with an otherworldly glow. The snake goddess stood tall, her presence both terrifying and beautiful. Her eyes locked onto Amina, and a sly smile graced her lips. "You have summoned me, Amina," she said, her voice smooth and melodic. "How may I serve you?" Amina stammered, struggling to find her words. It was one thing to summon the goddess, but another to stand before her. "Gi goddess," she began, "we've captured Jeno, the leader of the hunters. I don't know what to do. The people say we should end his life, but I feel differently." The goddess tilted her head, listening intently as Amina poured out her heart. "I want revenge for the lives we've lost," she confessed, "but I also dream of peace. A peace where my people can thrive, where we can build a future. I came to you for guidance." The snake goddess smiled, pride flickering in her eyes. "It is wise to seek counsel," she said, "but even I cannot tell you what to do. The gods forbid me from influencing your choice. You must form a council, a group of trusted people who will help you decide on important issues in the future. Whatever path you take, Amina, I will stand with you. Your decision will be my decision." Before fading back into the whirlwind, the goddess left Amina with a final piece of advice. "Visit the guardian of the forest. She expects you. If Kwame survives the duel, take him with you. He has favor with the spirit of the forest. And bring her a gift. She has a fondness for homemade beer. It will soften her heart." Then, just as suddenly as she appeared, the goddess vanished, leaving Amina to face the weight of the choices ahead. Jeno and Kwame circled each other, swords drawn. Amina watched, her heart beating fast. This duel was meant to decide the future, to let the gods choose between hunter and snake. She nodded to Lunga, signaling the start. "May the fight begin," Lunga shouted. The clash of steel rang through the clearing as the two warriors charged. Jeno's attacks were fierce, calculated, but Kwame was quick, moving with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. He wasn't attacking, only defending. "Transform into the snake, Kwame," Jeno shouted. "A snake must fight a hunter." Kwame's jaw tightened, his grip on the sword unwavering. "No," he said, "I'll fight you as a hunter, because I am one." "You are not a hunter," Jeno roared. For Kwame, the sting of those words was sharper than any sword. He had hoped for Jeno's approval, yearning for the man he saw as a father to see him as more than a curse. The fight raged on, but it became clear that Kwame was unmatched. It was as if the snake within him and the hunter's instincts had fused into something extraordinary. Jeno fought fiercely, but he couldn't keep up. "Finish him!" the snake people hissed from the sidelines. "End him!" But Kwame didn't. He couldn't. This was the man he admired, the first figure in his life who had earned his respect. Kwame could not take Jeno's life, even if it meant betraying his people's expectations. Kwame stepped back, dropping his sword to the ground. "That's it," he said, his voice steady. "I won't fight you anymore. Your blood will not stain my hands. If your life must end, it won't be by me." The snake people erupted in anger. "Traitor!" they cried. "Finish him!" But Kwame stood firm, his head bowed. He knelt before Jeno, offering himself instead. "Take my life," Kwame said. "If a death is required, let it be mine." Jeno froze, his sword trembling in his hands. Rage and confusion boiled within him. Kwame, the symbol of the snake people he had spent his life fighting, was now kneeling before him, offering his life willingly. Jeno's mind raced. Could he end this man? Could he truly strike down someone who had fought with such honor? The sword clattered to the ground as Jeno fell to his knees. He reached out, pulling Kwame into an embrace. Tears streamed down both their faces as they wept, a bond forming in the unlikeliest of moments. The snake people gasped in disbelief, their whispers filling the clearing as they turned to their queen. Amina stood frozen, watching the two men, not knowing how to respond. She didn't have the answers, not in that moment, but one thing became undeniably clear. The future of their world had just shifted, in a way no one could have foreseen. Above, the god of the universe, the snake goddess, hunter goddess, watched in silence, their eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. Even they, it seemed, were taken aback, uncertain what to make of this moment. The gods do not always look into the future. They prefer the drama, the thrill of watching events unfold in real time. After all, what's the fun in knowing everything? For them, the beauty lies in the unpredictability, in the choices of mortals shaping the course of destiny. And now they too watched, holding their breath, as the story continued to write itself. How's my tribe doing? Still with me on this wild ride? I hope so, because we're nearing the peak, and it only gets better from here. Up next, Episode 9, Snake People Danger. Are you ready to face the shadows? It had been many long days of relentless patrols, and exhaustion was beginning to take its toll on the guards. Sleep was scarce, and the disorientation from constant alertness was now getting to them. Musa, one of the guards, leaned against the cold stone wall, struggling to keep his eyes open as he made his rounds. The corridors were silent, save for the occasional faint scratch or hiss from behind the huge doors. Then he heard it, a voice, soft.
I can give you silver and gold, more than you've ever dreamed of. Just a moment, just a look.
Musa froze, his heart beating fast. He turned toward the voice, his eyes narrowing at the heavy steel barrier between him and the snake man. The voice was different from the usual cries and moans. It wasn't desperate, it was calm, persuasive, dripping with promises of fortune and a better life. Curious, he took a cautious step closer, his weapon held tightly in his hands.
Open the door, Musa. Come closer so we can discuss your future. There's no harm in talking, is there?
Musa hesitated. His grip on his weapon loosened as the voice continued, smooth and convincing.
You're tired, Musa. I can help you. All I ask is a moment of your time. Think of what you could have. Wealth, freedom, everything you've ever wanted.
Musa's hands trembled. The past few days had been hell, and his mind, exhausted, started to entertain the idea. What harm could it do to just listen? Maybe this snake person wasn't like the others. Maybe it really did want to talk. He leaned closer to the door, peering into the small keyhole, but there was only darkness on the other side. It's been such a long few days, Musa muttered to himself. Maybe I should just hear this fellow out. His fingers moved to the bolt, trembling as he slid it free. The heavy metal door groaned, inching open into the darkness. The snake person on the other side grinned, a sinister glint in its eyes, before launching itself into the air, its fangs aimed directly at Musa's neck. In that instant, there was no time to react, no moment for thought, only the flash of terror and instinct. To truly grasp the weight of this moment, we must journey back to the very beginning. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. For years, the snake people had feasted on human blood, savoring its intoxicating power. What had started as a necessity quickly became an addiction. Their leader, Eli, had lost his brother to the madness brought on by human blood. He had seen the writing on the wall. If they continued down this path, they would self-destruct. His decree was firm. No one will go outside. We must wean ourselves off the blood of humans, or we will perish. The order was absolute, enforced with strict discipline. A few days later, humans now walked the corridors, monitoring the snake people's progress. Each human was chosen carefully, strong, disciplined, and immune to fear. They had one rule: never open the doors, no matter what you hear. The doors were massive, reinforced with steel, and locked from the outside. No one inside could open them, no matter how hard they tried. And try they had. The keys hung only at the belts of the human guards who patrolled the corridors, their faces tense as they listened to the desperate cries from within. "Come inside," one voice rasped. "I need your help with something. It won't take long." Another voice, softer, almost pleading. "Please, just a little closer. I only want to see you. Just a drop, that's all I ask. You won't miss it." The humans knew better. These were not cries for help, but clever traps. Once inside, they would become prey, victims of the snake people's unrelenting hunger. Behind the doors, the snake people writhed in agony. Their bodies, once strong and commanding, now trembled with withdrawal, the cravings overwhelming them, turning their whispers into screams and their thoughts into chaos. Eli's command stayed in their minds. "We must overcome this, or we will perish." Around the world, his word had been sent. Snake people in every corner of the globe were locked away, fighting the same battle. The plan was working, for now. The humans patrolled diligently, standing as both jailers and reminders of what the snake people could not have. But how long could it last? Well, the answer lay in Musa's hands as his fingers moved to the bolt, trembling as he slid it free. The heavy metal door groaned, inching open into the darkness. The moment the door creaked open, it happened. A shadow moved faster than he could react, slamming into him with unimaginable force. He was lifted off his feet, his back crashing into the stone wall with a sickening thud. Pain shot through him as his weapon clattered to the ground. The scent of the human's blood filled the air, and a guttural hiss escaped its lips. Musa's scream echoed down the corridor, loud and piercing. The other guards froze, their eyes wide with horror. The corridor erupted into chaos as the snake person, energized by its first taste of fresh blood in weeks, tore through the halls. The guards scrambled, shouting orders, but it was too late. Behind the other doors, the snake people heard the commotion. They banged against the barriers, their voices rising in desperate pleas. "Brother, please, open the doors. Don't leave us here." The rogue snake person, its hunger briefly sated, stood before one door. It hesitated for a moment, its blood-stained lips curling into a sinister smile. Then, with strength fueled by addiction and frenzy, it ripped the bolt from the outside, flinging the door open. Another snake person emerged, its eyes locking onto the terrified guards. One by one, the doors opened. The halls were now filled with the sound of screams, hisses, and the sickening thud of bodies hitting the ground. The snake people, once confined, poured into the corridors, their hunger overwhelming any shred of discipline they had left. In his private chamber, Eli heard the chaos. His heart sank as he peered through a small hole in his door, seeing the carnage unfold. Blood stained the floors, and the air was thick with terror. "Brothers, no," Eli's voice thundered through the halls, desperate. "Please, we have come so far. Do not throw this all away." He pressed his hands against the door, his voice cracking as he shouted, "We have a war to fight. This hunger will destroy us before we even begin. Please, stay in your rooms. Be patient." But his words fell on deaf ears. The scent of fresh blood filled his nostrils, and he felt his own control slipping. His mouth watered, and his sharp teeth bit into his tongue in an effort to keep himself steady. Yet the hunger gnawed at him, relentless and cruel. The screams in the corridors grew louder. Eli crumbled as he heard the sounds spill beyond the castle. He froze as a new sound reached his ears, screams from the streets outside. His heart sank. The snake people were loose, spilling into the city like a plague. He sank to his knees, his fists clenched. He had failed. The hunger had won. "It's over," he muttered, staring at the chaos through the small window in his room. The corridors, the city, the world, they were all about to fall into darkness, and there was nothing Eli could do. In the stillness of the forest, Cabo the Great stood tall, his ears twitching as the faint, distant screams of the city reached him. The cries were sharp, filled with terror. His glowing eyes narrowed, the hunter within him stirring, awakened by the sound of people in danger. Around him the hunters stood in silence, their keen ears catching every note of the chaos. Their glowing eyes mirrored Cabo's, burning with purpose and readiness. Cabo clenched his fists. "Brothers, sisters," he said, his voice steady yet fierce. "The time has come." The screams call to us. This is what we were made for, what we have been training for. The cries grew louder, more desperate, each one fueling the fire in their hearts. There was no time to wait, no time for speeches. Cabo raised his head, his eyes sweeping over the hunters. "May the goddess be with you," he said, before commanding the hunters to charge the city. Without hesitation, the hunters sprang into action. They ran as one, their feet barely touching the ground, their senses locked onto the city ahead. The forest blurred around them as they raced, their ears focused on the cries that seemed to grow sharper with every step. The sound was unbearable. It drove them faster, their glowing eyes cutting through the darkness like twin fires of hope. As they broke through the tree line, the city unfolded before them. Fire leaped into the sky, and the streets were alive with chaos. The people screamed, and the hisses of their attackers filled the air. Cabo's voice roared through the chaos as he led the charge. "Protect the people! Leave no snake person standing!" The hunters didn't hesitate. They surged forward, their bodies disappearing into the chaos of the city, ready to fight for the lives of those who could not defend themselves. The war to protect the innocent had begun. The snake goddess paced her chambers. Lately it seemed that all she did was worry over her people. The snake people had faced so much, and even now, as they settled in their newfound home, trouble loomed on them. Her thoughts were interrupted by a firm knock on the door. She stopped mid-step, her heart beating. A servant's voice came from the other side. "Goddess, the god of the forest requests an audience with you." "The god of the forest?" she repeated, her voice concerned. She had never had a private meeting with him before. Their paths had crossed briefly in the corridors of heaven, where they had exchanged polite nods, but nothing more. Why was a first-tier god seeking her audience, she wondered. Straightening her posture, the snake goddess took a deep breath and signaled for the servant to let him in. When the door opened, the god of the forest stepped inside. He was tall and commanding, yet there was a warmth about him, his presence like the steady rustling of leaves in a calm breeze. His smile was kind, and his voice when he spoke was smooth and inviting. "Goddess," he said with a small bow, "thank you for seeing me." She returned the smile, though her heart beat faster. "What do I owe the rare pleasure of your visit?" she asked, her voice steady despite her unease. "I will not waste your time," he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "I came to discuss the settlement of the snake people in my forest. Let me be frank, goddess. They are upsetting the balance of the ecosystem. Their snake forms moving with unnatural speed are overhunting and causing destruction. Trees are being uprooted, habitats destroyed. They pursue their hunter enemies with no regard for the forest." The snake goddess listened intently, her face calm, though inside she felt dread. "Goddess," he continued, his eyes meeting hers, "as the god of the forest, it is my duty to speak to you first before more. Drastic measures are taken." She smiled faintly, though her chest felt tight. "Thank you for coming to me with this," she said with sincerity. "I understand your concerns, and they are valid. My people have endured great hardship over the years, as you know. Now that they have found a place to call home, I only wish for peace. Perhaps we can find a solution, one that allows us to live in harmony with the creatures of your forest." The forest god tilted his head, thoughtful. "How could this be mutually beneficial?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The snake goddess hesitated. Her mind searched for an answer. Then an idea began to take shape. "Your forest is vast," she said carefully, "and you have much to protect. The Guardian works tirelessly to defend it, but even her reach has limits. Humans have been cutting down trees for years, reducing the forest bit by bit for their paper and tables." She took a step closer, her voice growing stronger. "My people can help defend the forest from shrinking further. Their speed and strength, which you now see as a burden, can be a shield. They can protect the balance you hold so dear." The god of the forest paused, her words sinking in. Her argument was compelling, and it touched a nerve. She was right. What was a forest god without a forest? He nodded slowly. "Very well," he said at last. I will inform the Guardian to expect your queen. She will discuss the terms of the settlement and ensure this alliance benefits the forest as much as it does your people." The snake goddess bowed her head respectfully. "Thank you, forest god. You have my deepest gratitude." With that, the god of the forest bowed and left her chambers, leaving the snake goddess standing in the silence. She took a deep breath, her worry momentarily replaced by hope. Perhaps at last, there was a way forward, one that could save both her people and the forest they now called home. Zoro, Sia, and Tendai sat together in grandmother's hut. This was their last night there, and they were determined to honor her. They laughed, recounting stories of grandmothers, reminiscing about her remarkable life. But now she was gone, and the time had come to move on. Zoro turned to Tendai, his face serious. "Tendai, from this point forward, you are a hunter. You have left the snake in the forest. There will be no hissing where we are going." Tendai nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Sia added, "I know you love to talk, Tendai, but where we're going, you must resist that urge. The hunters we will meet are not just hunters, they are gods among men. Silence is your shield." Tendai nodded again, his heart pounding. Zoro chuckled. "You can speak now, my boy. We didn't say you must never speak." The three of them laughed, breaking the tension. Zoro, Sia, and Tendai stood in front of Kabo. It had only been 7 days, but so much had happened that it felt like a lifetime. Kabo, the leader of the hunters, was getting married the same day. It was more than a personal celebration. It was a symbolic step toward ensuring the survival of the hunters. Reproduction was no longer just tradition. It was a necessity, a vital part of their fight to restore what had been lost at Snake Island. But before the celebration, there was the issue of the boy, Tendai. "Is this the boy?" he asked Zoro, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," Zoro replied firmly. Kabo motioned with his hand. "Come closer, young man." Tendai hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to run. Kabo's intense scrutiny made him feel exposed, like a rabbit cornered by a predator. Sia pushed him forward, and Tendai stumbled, taking an awkward step toward Kabo. Kabo leaned in, his nostrils flaring as he sniffed around Tendai. His eyes narrowed, puzzled. "Zoro," Kabo said sharply, "you told me this boy was part snake. How is it I can detect nothing of it?" Zoro's face went pale. He stammered, "The snake. It has been bound. Removed." "Removed?" Kabo's voice rose in disbelief. He sniffed Tendai again. "How?" Zoro glanced at Tendai, then answered carefully. "The guardian of the forest helped us." Kabo's expression darkened. "Zoro," he said slowly, his voice like thunder rumbling in the distance. "You made a pact with an outside entity without consulting the Brotherhood? How much will this cost the Brotherhood?" "Nothing," Sia interjected quickly. "The debt has been paid in full." Tendai wanted to speak, to explain how the mermaids had offered to help, but the deal had gone wrong. But he remembered his father's warning. "You must not speak." Kabo stared at Zoro for a long moment before his expression softened. "Zoro," he said, "you have brought me a hunter, and a hunter he shall be." Kabo stepped forward and embraced Zoro, a rare smile breaking through his usually stern face. "Welcome back, my old friend," Kabo said. It was clear he had missed his right-hand man. Tendai leaned toward his father and whispered, "Are we not going to tell him about the 7 generations thing?" Sia leaned in, his voice low and threatening. "This is the last time you will speak of 7 generations. Do you understand me?" Before Tendai could respond, a soft voice spoke from behind them. "What's this about 7 generations?" Nala appeared, her smile wide. Tendai's heart raced. Sia stammered, caught off guard. "Is this your son?" Nala asked, not waiting for an answer. She turned to Tendai. "What's your name, young man?" Tendai," he stuttered. Nala smiled warmly and pulled him into a hug. "Something tells me you and I are going to be great friends." Before Tendai could respond, Temba and Olu entered the room, greeting him with firm handshakes and hearty laughter. "Is this the newest member of the Hunters?" Olu asked. "Welcome, young man." Tendai looked around, overwhelmed by the warmth of their welcome. He had never known such kindness, such camaraderie. Nala raised a glass, her voice ringing out. A toast to the greatest leader of the hunters, and a warm welcome to the youngest member of our family. The room erupted in cheers as everyone drank. Tendai felt his chest swell with pride and gratitude. For the first time in his life, he felt like he truly belonged. Kabo's voice cut through the celebration. "This room is too crowded. Get out, all of you." He waved them off, though a small smile tugged at his lips. The hunters groaned good-naturedly as they filed out, leaving Kabo alone. The door closed behind them, and for the first time in years, Kabo let a single tear of happiness fall. This was truly the happiest day of his life. Amina sat at the head of the table, her eyes sweeping across the 7 council members she had carefully chosen. Among them were Lunga and Kwame. She had her reasons for keeping Kwame close. The goddess herself seemed to favor him, though Amina wasn't blind to the tension this created. The others, their faces serious, watched her in silence, waiting for her to speak. "Thank you for answering the call to serve," Amina began. "You are here because I cannot make this decision alone. The fate of our people hangs in the balance, and I need your wisdom. The issue before us is Jeno, the leader of the hunters. We cannot keep him here indefinitely. His people will come for him, and when they do, they will bring fire and destruction to our doorstep. This council must decide his fate." One of the snake people, Juma, stood to speak. "My queen, I thank you for forming this council. It shows your care for our people and your respect for our voices. But I must raise a grave concern. There is someone among us who has already betrayed our kind by sparing Jengo's life. This cannot go unanswered." Kwame sat quietly, his face calm, but his hands clenched beneath the table. He had refused to strike the fatal blow that would have ended Jengo's life, and now his choice had brought him to the center of judgment. Before anyone else could speak, Amina raised her hand, her voice firm. "I chose Kwame to sit on this council, and I expect you to respect my decision. We are here to address the matter of Jeno, not to debate the past actions of one man." The room fell silent, though the air still buzzed with unspoken questions. Elder Chike, his voice rough with age, rose to his feet. "My queen," he began, "I propose we release Jeno. I know this may sound unthinkable, but hear me out. We have just come from a war. Yes, we won, but at great cost. Our people are tired, wounded, and grieving. If we let Jeno go, perhaps we can use this moment to broker peace. Let his people take him, and let us use the time we gain to rebuild and heal." Gasps echoed around the room. Amina silenced them. "Elder Chiki, please continue," she said. "This could be our opportunity, my queen. We cannot fight endlessly. Our people deserve a moment to breathe, to feel safe in this home we have found. If Jengo's release buys us time, then I believe it is worth it." There was a murmur of agreement, but not all were convinced. Another elder stood abruptly. "Peace?" he scoffed. "The hunters would never grant us peace. If the situation were reversed, would they release one of us? Would they let you go, my queen? They would end your life without hesitation. We must show strength. Ending Jengo's life would send a message to the hunters and ensure they know we are not to be trifled with." A tense silence filled the room, the elders' words resonating with the pain of those who had lost loved ones to the hunters. Another voice broke through. "But this is a rare chance," a younger member said. "We have never captured someone of Jengo's rank. He is a bargaining chip, an opportunity to shape a better future for our people. I agree with Elder Chike." Lunga cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "My queen," he said, his tone careful, "I have listened to both sides. It is true that peace would benefit us, but can we trust the hunters? If we release Jeno, they may see it as a sign of weakness and attack while we are vulnerable. I am torn, but my heart tells me we cannot let him live." Amina closed her eyes briefly, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She looked up, her gaze falling on Kwame. "Kwame," she said softly, "what are your thoughts?" Kwame hesitated. "My queen, I fear my judgment on this matter is clouded. I chose to spare Jeno before, and that choice has already decided where I stand. With your permission, I would rather not weigh in on the matter." Amina nodded. "Very well," she said. She turned to the rest of the council. "We will put this to a vote. All those in favor of ending Jeno's life, raise your hands." The room grew still. Slowly, hands began to rise. Some were hesitant, others resolute, but one by one the decision was made. Amina counted silently, her face betraying none of the conflict she felt. The majority had spoken. The fate of Jeno, and perhaps the future of their people, had been sealed with a vote. And that, my dear tribe members, brings us to the end of yet another thrilling episode in our Snake People and Hunters series. The long-anticipated showdown is finally near. The Hunters and the Snake People are on the brink of war. Tendai has at last met the Hunters and been warmly welcomed into their fold, while the fate of Jeno has been sealed. As you all know, every season concludes with an unforgettable battle. This was episode 9 of season 3, and the grand finale is episode 10. To everyone who has watched the entire series from the very first episode of season 1, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your unwavering support, encouragement, and love for these stories are the reason this journey continues. You are the true heartbeat of this series, and I am endlessly grateful to have you by my side every step of the way. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think will happen next? 10. Battle of the Gods. Prepare yourselves. This isn't just a battle, it's one for the ages. Let's witness the storm. Cabo and the Hunters surged into the city. The streets were already in chaos. Screams tore through the air, mixing with the strange hissing of the Snake People as they twisted into grotesque, towering serpents. The Hunters struck with deadly precision, their spears a blur as they plunged into the scaled, writhing bodies of their enemies. At the forefront was Cabo, his every move deliberate, his every strike lethal. The Snake People were wild, their attacks savage and uncoordinated. They thrashed and struck with blind rage, their monstrous bodies smashing through walls and tearing apart anything in their path. Their eyes glowed with a rage, the madness consuming them as they lashed out at the Hunters and even each other. It was chaos, a storm of violence and destruction swallowing the city whole. Cabo moved through it all with unyielding focus, his spear precise as he thrust it deep into the abdomen of a massive snake person. The creature let out an ear-piercing screech before collapsing, its tail slapping the ground with a thud. Cabo's chest heaved as he took in the carnage around him, bodies of townsfolk and Snake People scattered like broken dolls. The air smelled of blood and smoke, but amidst the devastation something troubled his mind. Eli was nowhere to be seen. Cabo's gaze snapped upward, locking onto the castle perched atop the hill. Eli was there. The new leader of the Snake People, the one who had to be ended, waited inside. With a deep breath, Cabo tightened his grip on his spear and began to run, weaving through the chaos. He dodged snapping jaws and leapt over fallen debris, his focus razor sharp. The castle was his destination, and nothing would keep him from it. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. High above in the cold, towering castle, Eli stood at the window of his chamber. His hands rested on the stone sill, his eyes looking at the city below. The cries of the people reached his ears, a mix of fear and pain. But amidst the chaos, a sharper sound rose, the clash of metal, the screeches of dying Snake People. His eyes narrowed as he spotted the Hunters. They moved with precision, cutting through his people like blades slicing through reeds. The sight sent anguish through him, but there was something else, a grim acceptance. This was their doing. This was his doing. He clenched his fists. The Snake People's descent into madness was irreversible, but he couldn't let their legacy end in blood and fire. Not like this. With a resolute breath, Eli turned from the window and strode to the heavy chamber door. Its latch was cold beneath his hand, but he hesitated only for a moment before pulling it open. His was the only door with a latch on the inside. The corridor beyond was dark, the scent of blood thick in the air. It tugged at the hunger deep within him, but he pushed it down, focusing instead on the task ahead. Eli scanned the corridor, his heart sinking as his eyes fell on his wife's door, wide open. His son's door was the same. They were gone, out in the streets now, caught in the chaos. If only he had known. But there was no time to grieve. His gaze darted to Maria's door. It was still closed. She was still inside. Eli was relieved. Other doors in the hallway remained shut as well, a small glimmer of hope in an otherwise hopeless scene. He made his way to another door. Without hesitation, Eli unlatched it and stepped inside. Maria was there, slumped against the wall, her breaths ragged and shallow. Her once strong frame was trembling, her face pale and glistening with sweat. Her eyes were open, glassy and unfocused, but as they landed on Eli, a spark of recognition broke through the haze. She too was battling the addiction, fighting the insatiable hunger that clawed at her from within. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Maria braced herself against the wall and pushed to her feet. Though unsteady, her movements were filled with purpose. She was the widow of Eli's brother, Mambo, and she carried his unbreakable spirit in her heart. "We fight," she said, her voice hoarse but firm. Eli extended his hand and Maria took it. Together they stepped out into the corridor. Eli and Maria moved to the next door with purpose. Behind it was Maria and Mambo's son, Daniel. When they opened it, the young man inside flinched, startled as the bright light from the corridor spilled into his darkened room. His eyes glinted with primal hunger, and he shielded them against the sudden glare. The scent of blood that lingered in the hallway made him tremble, his body reacting instinctively to the overwhelming craving. Eli stepped inside, kneeling before Daniel. His face was stern as he placed both hands firmly on his nephew's shoulders. "You are our last hope, young man," Eli said, his voice calm. Daniel blinked, confused. "What do you mean, Uncle?" he asked, his voice cracking, the hunger making it difficult for him to focus. Eli shook him gently, leaning closer to ensure his words cut through the haze. "Listen to me, Daniel. Our people are finished here. Our legacy, our very survival, depends on you now. You must go. You must ride to your aunt and her husband. They must be warned. Tell them what has happened here. They are the last hope for preserving the snake people. The hunters will show no mercy." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "No. I have to stay to fight alongside you together with Mother, for the sake of Father." Maria, standing silently beside them, knelt to hug her son tightly. "You must go, my son. You must survive. The legacy of Mambo cannot perish here," she said, her voice trembling. "Please go, do not stop, do not turn back, no matter what you see or hear. Ride straight to them and deliver this message. Promise me, Daniel, promise me," Maria shouted through her tears. Daniel nodded, tears falling freely from his eyes. Eli stood and moved to a hidden door in the corner of the room. It had been there all along, blending seamlessly into the wall, unnoticed by Daniel until now. Eli opened it, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel stretching into the depths below the castle. The air inside was damp and cold, carrying the faint smell of earth and mildew. "Go into this tunnel," Eli instructed. "Follow it to the stables. There, you will find horses. Take one and ride without stopping. Do not taste blood, no matter how desperate you feel. The carnage in the streets will tempt you, but you must resist. Everything depends on you, Daniel. Our people's future rests in your hands. Tell them what's coming. Tell them to prepare." Daniel hesitated, fear and uncertainty flashing in his eyes, but the look in his uncle's face and the desperation in his mother's touch gave him strength. He nodded. "I'll do it," he said quietly, his voice gaining strength. "I promise." Eli clapped him on the shoulder, pride softening his grim expression. Maria held her son one last time, her tears falling freely now. "Go, my son. May the goddess guide you," she whispered. Daniel turned and stepped into the dark tunnel. He stumbled at first, holding a torch to light his way, as he moved deeper into the underground passage. The sound of his footsteps faded into the distance, and Maria wiped her tears, composing herself. This was likely the last time she would see her son. Eli closed the hidden door. He turned to Maria, his voice low but intense. "We've done what we can for the future of our people. Now it's our turn." Together they moved through the corridor, opening the doors to the rooms of the few snake people who had not yet escaped or fallen to madness. Slowly, a small group of frightened but determined individuals gathered in the hallway. Standing before them, Eli took a deep breath. "My brothers and sisters," he began, "the hunters are here. Our people are falling, consumed by the hunger driven to madness. But we are not without strength. We may not survive this night, but we can still fight for our dignity, for the memory of who we once were. We are not just creatures of hunger. We are more than this madness." The group stood silently, their eyes fixed on Eli as he spoke. "The bloodlust has taken so much from us, our families, our minds, our future. But it does not have to take our honor. Tonight we fight not just for survival, but to prove that we are still capable of control, of courage, of sacrifice." Maria stepped forward, standing beside Eli. "This is our home," she said, her voice breaking but strong. "And if we are to fall, we will fall fighting together. This is our moment to reclaim who we are. Let us stand as one." Eli raised his fist. "Tonight we face the hunters, not as beasts, but as a people with a legacy worth dying for. If this is our end, let it be a story worth remembering. For Mambo and Kato, for our children, for the snake people." The small group let out a guttural cheer, their fear replaced by a newfound resolve. With Eli and Maria leading them, they marched toward the castle gates, ready to face the hunters and the fate that awaited them. The gates to the city creaked open, the sound drowned out by the chaos beyond. The snake people stepped forward, their eyes widening in disbelief as they took in the hellish scene before them. Fires raged, consuming homes and shops that once stood. The screams of terrified citizens echoed through the streets, mixing with the deafening screeches of the serpents and the cries of the hunters. The city they had built with their own hands, their crowning achievement, was now a burning wasteland. Eli paused at the threshold of the gate, staring into the inferno. His heart clenched as he whispered under his breath, "Goddess, have you forgotten us? Protect us from this madness." But there was no answer, only the roar of flames and the cries of despair. Behind him, Maria stepped forward, her jaw clenched as she took in the carnage. If this was to be their end, she would make it one to remember. She would honor the memory of her husband by fighting to the very end. The snake people began to transform, their human forms twisting into massive serpents. Scales glinted in the firelight as they joined the fray, launching themselves into battle. The hunters fought back with relentless precision, their swords finding their marks, even as the monstrous snakes lunged and coiled around them. The battle was ferocious, a whirlwind of claws, fangs, and weapons clashing in the streets. Maria charged forward, her serpent form towering over the chaos. Her movements were fluid, a deadly dance as she struck down hunters with swift, calculated strikes. A group of hunters surrounded her, their swords raised, but she spun with astonishing speed, her tail sweeping them off their feet. She reared back and let out a guttural hiss, her fangs glinting as she lunged at another group, scattering them like leaves in a storm. Eli moved through the chaos. His serpent form was sleek and powerful, his strikes devastating. He weaved through the streets, his eyes scanning for Cabo. His people were falling all around him, their bodies writhing in pain and madness. But Eli fought on, each strike a testament to his will to protect what was left of their legacy. He slammed into a group of hunters, sending them sprawling, then coiled around another, crushing him before moving on. Suddenly, amidst the chaos, his eyes locked onto Cabo. The hunter stood tall amidst the wreckage, his glowing eyes fixed on Eli with equal intensity. For a moment, the world seemed to still. Eli and Cabo stared at each other, each knowing this was the fight that would decide everything. Cabo raised his sword, and Eli surged forward, their clash sending shockwaves through the street. Cabo's sword scraped against Eli's scales as the serpent twisted, attempting to coil around him. Cabo dodged with agility, driving his sword toward Eli's head. Eli lashed out with his tail, narrowly missing Cabo as the hunter rolled to safety. Their fight was brutal, a deadly dance of strength and skill, neither giving the other an inch. Nearby, Maria fought valiantly, her strikes growing more desperate as the battle raged on. She had taken down a few hunters, but her strength was waning. A hunter's sword grazed her side and she let out a sharp hiss of pain, retaliating with a powerful strike that sent her attacker flying. But another hunter came from behind, and then another. She fought them off, her movement slower now, her breathing labored. Then it happened. Maria let out a piercing screech, a sound that cut through the chaos and froze Eli in place. He turned toward the sound, just in time to see her massive form collapsing to the ground with a thunderous crash. Her body lay motionless, blood pooling around her as the light faded from her eyes. Eli's heart shattered. "Maria!" he cried, his voice filled with anguish. He felt his resolve falter, his movements slowing as the weight of his failure pressed down on him. His mind raced with guilt and regret. Perhaps if he hadn't quarantined them, if he had led differently, they wouldn't have reached this point. He had failed Maria, failed his brother, failed his people. Cabo saw the opening. With a fierce cry, he lunged at Eli, his swords driving deep into the serpent's side. Eli roared in pain, thrashing wildly, but Cabo was relentless. Blow after blow landed, and Eli's strength ebbed away. He tried to fight back, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. The sight of Maria's lifeless body had drained him of all hope. Eli collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud, his massive form motionless. Tears streamed from his eyes as he looked up at the burning sky. "I'm sorry, brother. I am not the man you were," he whispered, his voice barely audible amidst the chaos. With a final shuddering sigh, his body went still. The light in his eyes faded. The leader of the snake people was no more. Cabo stood over Eli's body, his sword still in hand. The battle was over, but the war had just begun. In a distant land, early the next morning, a lone guard stood at the castle gates. He squinted into the horizon, his sharp eyes catching the faint outline of a horse galloping toward the castle. At first it seemed unoccupied, the reins flapping loosely as the animal trudged forward, its pace uneven and weary. But as the horse drew closer, the guard's eyes widened. Slumped over the saddle was a young man barely clinging to consciousness. "Help him!" the guard shouted, his voice echoing across the courtyard. Others rushed to the gate, their footsteps hurried. Daniel's body was limp, his clothes torn and stained with dust and dried blood. His face was pale, his lips cracked, but he was alive. His eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment he took in the faces around him. Relief washed over him as he realized he had made it. He had ridden through the night, every ounce of his strength focused on delivering the message his uncle had entrusted to him. "Bring water," a voice called out, and someone pressed a flask to Daniel's lips. He drank weakly, coughing as he tried to steady himself. His head lolled back, but then he straightened, his resolve forcing him to stay conscious. He had a mission to complete. "The hunters," he rasped, his voice hoarse but filled with urgency. "They're coming. They won't stop until they've destroyed us all." His words sent a ripple of shock through the gathered crowd. "You must prepare," he continued, his voice trembling. "You must preserve our legacy, the legacy of the snake goddess. If you don't, we will all perish." A tear slid down Daniel's cheek as he spoke, his grief bubbling to the surface. In one night, he had lost everything he held dear, his mother, his uncle, his people, his home. And yet, he had survived. He was the only one who had made it out of the first war between the hunters and the snake people. As his eyes closed, darkness enveloped him, and he drifted into unconsciousness. For now, he had done all he could. The future of his people and their struggle for redemption rested in the hands of those who had yet to fight. The hunters had gathered. The air was filled with the scent of burning herbs and fresh earth, a sacred aroma that made the moment feel timeless. Cabo stood at the center, his ceremonial garb catching the last rays of light. His face was calm, his emotions carefully held in check. But when his eyes met Zaria's, a flicker of warmth softened his stern expression. Zaria stood radiant, the intricate embroidery on the fabric telling stories of unity, resilience, and hope. A crown of braided leaves adorned her head, a tribute to her father, the late leader Makena. She carried his legacy with quiet strength, a reminder to all present of the lineage that had brought them here. An elder, his name Sundiata, stepped forward. His voice was deep, weathered, and carried the cadence of ancient wisdom.
Today, we do not merely unite two hearts, we bind the past to the present and the present to the future. In Zarya, we honor Elder Makena, who guided us through the storms of Snake Island. In Cabo, we honor the strength of Cabo the Great, a leader and founding ancestor. Our traditions are sacred, our bonds forged in more than love. They are forged in purpose. Cabo, Zarya, step forward.
Cabo reached for Zarya's hand, their fingers interlocking as they moved toward the elder. From a pouch at his side, the elder drew a small vial of ash, the remnants of a sacred fire that had burned for days to honor the hunters lost to Snake Island. He sprinkled the ash into a carved wooden bowl and poured in water from the forest's spring. With a stick of bone, he stirred the mixture until it turned murky.
As water binds with ash, so too shall your spirits bind. Drink now, and let the strength of the hunters flow through you.
Sundiata held the bowl out to them. Cabo was the first to drink, his expression unchanging as the bitter liquid slid down his throat. Zarya followed, her eyes momentarily closing as the earthy mixture settled within her. Around them, the hunters hummed in unison, their voices low and resonant, a sound that seemed to vibrate in the bones of the earth itself. Sundiata's voice rose, commanding.
Cabo, do you swear to lead with honor and to protect not only your wife but the brotherhood who look to you for guidance?
I swear, Cabo said, his voice calm.
And Zarya, do you swear to be the heart of this union, to nurture hope and resilience in the face of all that comes?
I swear, Zarya replied, her voice firm yet gentle. The elder dipped his fingers into the ash-water mixture and drew a line across their foreheads.
By the spirits of our ancestors and the life of the forest that surrounds us, you are now bound as one. Let this union be a beacon for the hunters, a reminder that from the ashes of loss, life rises anew.
The hunters clapped and raised their voices, their joy raw and unrestrained. Cabo pulled Zarya into a kiss, and for a moment, the world felt whole again. Yet amidst the celebration, Zoro's gaze wandered. Across the sea of smiling faces, his eyes found Nala. Nala stood apart, her expression warm but reserved. For a moment, the noise around Zoro faded. He and Nala seemed to exist in a pocket of stillness, tethered by unspoken words and shared memories, long-forgotten nights of youth spent talking beneath the stars, moments of connection that had never fully bloomed. Nala's gaze shifted briefly to the couple and then back to Zoro. Their eyes met again, and a flicker of something unspoken passed between them. Regret, longing. "Long live the couple!" a voice rang out, and the other hunters shouted the same, breaking the spell between Zoro and Nala. The hunters danced late into the night. The rhythm of the drums echoed through the forest, heavy with history and alive with hope. Each step felt like a declaration of renewal, a promise to the future. For Cabo, Zarya, Zoro, Nala, and even the younger hunters like Tendai, this was more than a wedding. It was a turning point, a moment where wounds from the past began to scab over and the path ahead seemed a little clearer. Jeno limped into the hunters' headquarters, his body battered and his face shadowed with exhaustion. The moment he stepped inside, every pair of eyes turned to him. The hunters froze where they stood, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. It was as if they had seen a ghost. The room was bustling with activity moments ago, hunters suiting up, sharpening weapons and checking gear. But now, everything stopped. They were preparing for war, and the sight of Jeno, alive and standing, felt like an omen. He moved slowly down the corridor, his left leg dragging slightly, leaving faint smudges of dirt on the pristine floor. Before he could go further, Elder Diallo stepped into his path. "Jeno." His voice carried surprise and confusion. "How is this possible?" Jeno met his eyes but said nothing. He was too tired to explain. "I need to speak with the council," he said firmly, his voice hoarse. "It's urgent. Gather them while I freshen up." Diallo shook his head. "No," he said, his voice sharp. "You will come with me now. You must explain to the elders what happened. They need answers." Jeno sighed heavily, but didn't argue. He knew this was the way of the hunters. There was no room for delay or secrecy. Diallo led him down the corridor, past rows of hunters who still stared, whispers trailing in their wake. As they entered the boardroom, Jeno froze. "Father!" a voice cried out. Nala, his daughter, rushed into the room, her arms flinging around his neck. "I thought I'd never see you again," she sobbed. Before he could respond, another figure stepped into the room. Nandi, his wife, stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. For a moment she didn't move, as if afraid he might disappear. But then she ran to him, pulling him into a tight embrace. "You're alive," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Thank you, goddess." The brief reunion was interrupted as the elders began to enter, one by one. Their faces were grim, their eyes hard and calculating. They took their seats around the long table, their attention fixed on Jeno. The room fell silent, except for the faint hum of a light above. Elder Diallo was the first to speak. "Jeno," he said, his voice steady and cold, "we need to know. How did you escape? The snake people do not let their prey go." "What happened?" Jeno stood in the center of the council chamber, his face calm but shadowed with exhaustion. His leg ached with every step he had taken to get here, but his resolve was unshaken. "No, I did not escape," Jeno said, his voice steady. "They let me go." The silence that followed was deafening. The hunters exchanged uneasy glances, struggling to comprehend what they had just heard. A hunter, especially one as legendary as Jeno, being released by the snake people. It was unheard of. It was unthinkable. Elder Mbali was the first to break the silence. "Let you go," she said, her voice sharp. "The snake people do not simply release their captives, least of all a hunter like you. What did they want? What did you promise them?" Jeno met her gaze without flinching. "They made a request," he said. "They asked for peace. 14 years without war between us and them." The room erupted into chaos. Elders shouted over one another, their voices filled with anger and disbelief. "Peace with the snake people?" Mbali shouted, her fists clenched. "How dare you even entertain such a notion?" Elder Diallo stood, raising his hand to quiet the room. His voice was deep and commanding. "Explain yourself, Jeno. Why would the snake people ask for peace? And why would they let you go to deliver this request?" "They are tired," Jeno replied. "They've lost warriors, just like we've lost brothers. They want time to recover, to rebuild." Elder Tabo snorted in disbelief. "And you believed them? You let them plant the seed of peace in your mind? Perhaps you've spent too much time among snakes, Jeno. You've started to think like them." Jeno's jaw tightened, but he held his composure. "I didn't agree to anything," he said firmly. "I told them I don't have the authority to make such decisions. That's why I'm here, to bring it to the council." Mbali's eyes narrowed. "You had no right to negotiate anything on behalf of the Brotherhood, Jeno. Yes, you are a leader, but that does not give you the power to decide matters of peace or war without the council." "I didn't decide anything, Mbali," Jeno said, his voice rising slightly. "But I wasn't about to throw away an opportunity to stop more bloodshed without consulting all of you." Diallo's voice cut through the growing tension. "And their response to your refusal?" "They said they would wait for our decision," Jeno replied, "but not forever." Elder Tao, the oldest and most measured of the council, leaned forward, his eyes heavy with thought. "We've lost many in this war," he said. "Our brothers, our sisters, our children. Is it truly wise to rush into another conflict without considering the cost? Perhaps a truce, even a temporary one, is what we need." Elder Tabo slammed his hand on the table. "Our purpose is clear. We are hunters, ordained by the gods to protect humanity from the snake people. Peace with them is an insult to everything we stand for." "What do we stand for, Tabo?" Jeno countered, his voice sharp. "Endless war, death, Sacrificing our people until there's nothing left of us? The room gasped in disbelief. Elder Sima broke the silence, his voice dripping with disdain. You've grown soft, Jeno. Weak. First, your daughter defies the Brotherhood and runs off to the snake people, and now this? You've brought shame upon us. Nandi, Jengo's wife, stood abruptly. How dare you question his loyalty, she shouted. Jeno has given everything for this Brotherhood, everything. And yet he has failed us all, Sima retorted coldly. I propose we relieve Jeno of his duties. He is no longer fit to lead us. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Nala, Jengo's daughter, stood, her voice breaking with emotion. You can't do this, she cried. My father has sacrificed more than any of you. Mbali's gaze turned icy. And what of your sacrifices, child? Running off to the snake people without approval? Your actions have only added to your father's disgrace. You are the reason your father stands in this position today. Nala felt shame wash over her. She had not realized her actions had far-reaching consequences. Diallo stood again, his face grim. Enough, he said. This isn't a decision we can take lightly. We must consult the goddess. Let her decide Jengo's fate. The council members nodded in agreement. The ceremony would be held. The goddess would choose a new leader if Jeno was deemed unworthy. Jeno stood motionless, his face drained. He had brought the snake people's offer to the council, but now it seemed he might pay the ultimate price for it. As the elders filed out, the room felt heavier than before. The fate of the hunters, the fragile hope of peace, and Jengo's own future now rested in the hands of the goddess. Whatever came next would shape the Brotherhood and Jengo's legacy forever. And just like that, my beloved tribe members, we've reached the end of Season 3 of our Snake People and Hunters series. What an incredible journey it has been to get to this point, and I'm so grateful to have shared it with all of you. Thank you for being part of this adventure, for your support and for allowing these stories to unfold in your hearts. If you haven't yet explored the entire series, I warmly invite you to start from Season 1 and join us as we navigate this extraordinary journey into the unknown. For those who've watched every episode along the way, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your presence has made this story even more meaningful. What are your plans for the upcoming holidays? Are you traveling, spending quality time with family and friends, or maybe just relaxing and recharging? I'd love to hear all about it. Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching our story, and we hope you enjoyed it. What lessons did you draw from this story? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and be part of the tribe. Thank you for watching The Tales of the Savannah. We will see you next time in the Savannah.